Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the office of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with abundant favor us, your servants, whom you've been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, that to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests we've committed to our charge. Amen. Proceed.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
I'll be doing it shortly before we get to order number 8.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Members who wish to take their seats so that I can. You can remain upstanding if you desire to. The member for Kangema apparently today doesn't want to sit. Honorable members, as you know, standing order number 225, clause 2, paragraph B, requires the Speaker to report to the House a petition other than those presented by a member. In that regard, I wish to report to the House that my office has received a petition from Mr. Zachary Kamau Githiki, Mr. Robert Waitito Dirango, and Miss Lydia Wanjiro Ndongo, who are representatives of Kihoto Homeowners Self-Help Group in Kihoto Estate, bordering Lake Naivasha in Nakuru County. The petitioners claim that following the rising water levels of Lake Naivasha and the resultant raging floods of early 2020, over 500 homeowners have been displaced from their homes. The water levels of the lake are still rising despite the abatements of rain induced induced floods, a situation that the Water Resources Authority has attributed to tectonic activities and effects of climate change. The petitioners aver that the flooding has also affected wildlife habitat that has made wildlife such as hippopotamus and buffaloes, among others, to stray from their habitats to the fields and homes within Kyoto Estate, causing destruction of crops, property, and livelihoods, fear, anxiety, and psychosocial related ailments among the residents of the said estate and surrounding areas. The petitioners state that while they appreciate the efforts by the various government agencies to mitigate the situation, recurrence of this phenomenon calls for urgent and permanent action. Honourable members, the petitioners therefore pray that this House intervenes on the issues raised in the petition with a view to recommending that the government repossesses affected flooded land as part of the lake and compensates or resettles the affected home and landowners on alternative land, perhaps on higher grounds, and further create a buffer between the lake and residential areas so as to avert human-wildlife conflicts. Pursuant to the provision of Standing Order 227, the petition stands committed to the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources for consideration. The committee is at liberty to engage or work in collaboration with the Departmental Committee on Lands while considering applicable prayers sought in the petition. The committee is required to consider the petition and report its findings to the House and to the petitioners in accordance with Standing Order 227, subsection 2. I thank you. Next.
Order number 5, papers.
Leader majority.
Honourable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, 4th of March, 2021, in the afternoon sitting. Number 1, the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year ended 30th of June 2019 and the certificates therein. A, the State Department for Planning, and B, State Department for Development of ASALs. Number 2, the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year ended 30th of June 2020 and the certificates therein. A, State Department for Post-Training and Skills Development. Number B, State Department for Transport. Number C, State Department for Infrastructure. D, Petroleum Development Fund. Number E, Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. F, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Number G, Insurance Regulatory Authority. Number H, the Ministry of Lands and Fiscal Planning. I, the Minister of Energy. And lastly, the State Department for Broadcasting and Telecommunications.
Next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
At this point, honourable members, I wish to draw your attention to the existence of a supplementary order paper. I hope it has been uploaded. First question is by the member for Kiambu, the Honourable Gathoni Mushomba. The Honourable Gathoni Mushomba, is she in the House or not in the House? You don't know how to operate them?
Sorry, I've been distracted by a member. I would request for a minute, just a minute.
Very well. The next one, member for Gilgil. I hope you have not also similarly been distracted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to confirm that the disruption is only specific to Honorable Mushomba. It did not spill over this side. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 72 of 2021 to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government. Number 1, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that Mr. Benson Jau Kayai a resident of Gilgil constituency and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, practicing law in Nairobi City, at Messrs. Njau, Kayai, and co-advocates, has been missing since 7th February 2021. Number 2, what is the status of the investigation into the disappearance of Mr. Njau, and how many suspects have been apprehended or questioned so far regarding his disappearance? And number 3, what specific measures has the government put in place to protect Kenyans from the spate of abductions that have been rampant in the country during the last 5 years? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question will be replied to before the Parliamentary Committee on Administration and National Security. Member for Kiambu, are you ready now? Oh, you are still undergoing disruptions.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm okay now. I rise to ask a question number 065 of 2021. What is the criteria used in the identification of elderly persons to benefit from the Inua Jamii Cash Transfer Program in the country and in particular in Kiambu County? Could the ministry consider ensuring that all the elderly persons who have attained the age of 70 years and above from 2017 are fully enrolled into the Inua Jamii Cash Transfer Program in Kiambu County? Part 3, what measures is the ministry putting in place to ensure that persons who attain the age of 70 years are automatically enrolled into the said program and start receiving the benefits immediately? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question will be replied to before the Parliamentary Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. The next question is by the member for Mhaya, who has requested for its deferment. The request has been acceded to. And just for the convenience of the House, I may also wish to defer question number 081 by the member for Tarbo, the Honorable Janet Sitiene. I have information that she will not be available. So those two questions are deferred. The next question is by the member for Konoin, the Honorable Brighton Yegon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask question number 075/221. Number 1, is the Cabinet Secretary aware of the deplorable state of Mogogoshek Kapkoros Libuet Road in Konoin constituency, Bomet County, which has actually been neglected and is in dire need of repair, given that the road users and farmers in the region rely on it to transport their produce to the market? Question number 2, when will the ministry upgrade the road to bitumen standard to reduce the high cost of vehicle maintenance and improve the comfort of passengers while using, especially the sick and the pregnant women?
Question to be replied to before the Parliamentary Committee on Transport and Public Works and Housing. The next question is by the member for Huisero, Honorable Wangaya.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to ask question number 76 of 2021, directed to the Cabinet Secretary, Education. 1, could the Cabinet Secretary provide details on the status of the construction of Huisero Education Office in Huisero Sub-County? 2, what is the expected cost of the construction of the said office? How much has been spent to date, and when is it expected to be completed? 3, what measures has the ministry put in place to ensure that the construction of the office is fully funded? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, the question will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Education and Research. The next question is by the member for Ikoloman, the Honorable Bernard Shinali, Majority Whip, the Honorable Wangwe, to ask on his behalf.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to ask on behalf of the MP for Ikolomani, question number 077 of 2021 to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development and Public Works. 1. Could the Cabinet Secretary undertake to construct the Mwilanya Bridge along the Akata-Shimanyiro Road, C783, and Lwanungu Bridge along the Sigalagala-Muhudu-Kaimosi Road, C678 in Ikolomani, Idaho East Ward, both in Ikolomani constituency that broke down and are in deplorable state and currently exposing road users, particularly school-going children, to danger. 2. What immediate intervention measures is the government putting in place as they construct the said bridge to avert the danger posed by the deplorable state of these two bridges? 3. What measures is the ministry putting in place to ensure that the said bridges are built to the required standard, considering that breakages of the said bridges have been recurring? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Question will be responded to before the same Departmental Committee of Transport, Public Works and Housing. That ends that segment of that under 7. Go to the statement by the Leader Majority on House business.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 44, 2, subsection A, I rise to give the following statement on behalf of the House Business Committee, which met on Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021, to prioritize the business for consideration. Honorable Speaker, on Tuesday next week, at both the afternoon and evening sittings, we hope to continue with the second reading of the following bills, if we do not conclude with them today. Number 1 is the Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service Bill of 2020, the County Government's Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 13 of 2018, the National Cohesion and Peace Building Bill, Senate Bill number 35 of 2018, the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Amendment Bill of 2020, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill number 3 Bill of 2019, the County Statutory Instruments Bill, which is Senate Bill number 21 of 2018. I thought we finished this one. The Impeachment Procedure Bill, Senate Bill number 15 of 2018, and the County Law Compliance and Enforcement Bill, Senate Bill number 25 of 2018. Number Speaker, during the same week, the House Business Committee has also scheduled consideration of the Public Fundraising Appeals Bill, National Assembly Bill number 66 of 2019 in Committee of the Whole House, and the debate on the report of the Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives on ratification of the Economic Partnership Agreement between Kenya and the United Kingdom. Honorable Speaker, the House is also expected to consider and conclude with the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the 2021 Budget Policy Statement by Tuesday, March 9th, 2021 at the latest, which will pave way for publication of the Division of Revenue Bill of 2021. In accordance with the provisions of Standing Order 22A, subsection 5 and 6, I wish to convey that the following Cabinet Secretaries are scheduled to appear before the departmental committees as follows. The Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives will appear before the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock on Tuesday, 9th of March, 2021, to answer the questions from the following members. A, question by the Honorable James Onyango Koyo, MP. B, question by the Honorable Gabriel Kagomukuha, MP, and by Honorable Andrew Mwadime, MP. The Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Public Works will appear before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing on Wednesday, the 10th of March, to answer the following questions, or questions by the following members. The Honorable Captain Rueda Obo, MP, the Honorable Julius Medi, MP, the Honorable Catherine Oruguru, MP, the Honorable Tindi Mwale, MP, the Honorable Ologo Alwoch, MP, the Honorable Kangogo Bowen, MP, the Honorable David Gikaria, MP, the Honorable Mada Wangari, MP, and lastly, the Honorable Mohamed Dedi, MP. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, the House Business Committee will convene on Tuesday, March the 9th, 2021, at 11 a.m. to reschedule the business for the coming week. I now wish to lay this statement on the table of the House. Thank you.
Honourable members, you will recall that on Tuesday, 2nd of March 2021, I made a communication updating the House on the status of returns by the county assemblies to the speakers of the House of Parliament with respect to the draft Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020. In that communication, it indicated that at the close of business on Monday, 1st of March 2021, 42 county assemblies had submitted their resolutions of the draft bill to the speakers of the House of Parliament. So far, out of the 42, only 2 county assemblies had rejected the bill. Honourable members, in addition to that number, we've also received certificates of approval and copies of the draft bill from the respective speakers of the county assemblies of Migori and Kilifi. This brings the total number of county assemblies that have approved the draft Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 to 42. 3 county assemblies are yet to submit their resolutions on the draft bill as of today, 1 p.m., 4th of March 2021, and these are Elgeyo Marakwet, Uasin Gishu, and Mandera county assemblies. Honourable members, you'll also recall that in my previous communication on this matter, I informed the House that the House Business Committee had resolved at its meeting held on Tuesday, 2nd of March 2021, that the bill be introduced for first reading today, 4th of March 2021, in the form that it was presented to the 47 county assemblies by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC. You will note from today's order paper for this afternoon sitting that this resolution has been adhered to. In addition, honourable members, the Clerk of the National Assembly informs me that he has obtained sufficient copies of the same bill as directed, indeed 600 copies to be precise, and that the bill has also been uploaded to the chamber gadgets for ease of access by members. Honourable members, as a precursor to the first reading of the bill, I have approved the procedural motion co-sponsored by the Leader of the Majority Party and the Leader of the Minority Party, appearing as order number 8 in today's order paper for this sitting. The objective of the procedural motion is to highlight the bill's journey so far and to enable the House to take note of the parliamentary process. Honourable members, once the bill is read a first time today, it shall stand committed to the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs. Having previously guided that the bill will be considered by the 2 houses of Parliament in a concurrent manner, the Speaker of the Senate and I have approved joint sittings of the joint sittings of the committees between the Departmental Committee of Justice and Legal Affairs and the Senate Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights, pursuant to provisions of Standing Order 202A, which provides for joint sittings of committees of Parliament. The 2 committees are at liberty to jointly undertake public participation on the bill and are expected to expeditiously report back to the Houses of Parliament on or before Tuesday, the 23rd of March 2021. This is in keeping with Article 257, Clause 7, which provides that if a draft bill has been approved by a majority of county assemblies, it shall be introduced in Parliament without delay. Honourable members, 2 pertinent issues have to be resolved because they are likely to arise. And these are, during second reading, who will move the second reading of the bill? And number 2, whether and how the House shall limit debate on a bill whose promoters are neither members of Parliament or a committee of the House. Honourable members, it is the practice of this House and the parliaments and other parliaments for the sponsor of a motion or bill to either move its consideration by the House or depute that responsibility to any other member with the approval of the Speaker. This applies to all the stages of the consideration of bills before the House. The rationale behind this is to allow the sponsor of the bill to apprise the House fully on the contents of the motion and to clarify on any pertinent issues raised by the members in the ensuing debates. As members are aware, a bill to amend the Constitution by popular initiative under Article 257 of the Constitution is not sponsored by the leader of the majority party, neither the leader of the minority party, or a committee of this House, or a member of this House. Its promoters would qualify to be rightly referred to, in our language, strangers to the House. Honourable members, Article 257, clauses 7, 8, and 9 of the Constitution, which govern the consideration of an amendment to the Constitution by popular initiative by Parliament, do not in themselves identify the specific mover of the key processes of introduction and consideration. They provide, and I quote, repeating clause 7, that the bill, if a bill has been approved by a majority of the County Assembly, shall be introduced in Parliament without delay. 8, a bill under this article is passed by Parliament if supported by a majority of the members of each House. And 9, if Parliament passes the bill, it shall be submitted to the President for assent in accordance with Article 256, paragraphs, clauses 4 and 5. Honourable members, to my mind, therefore, the Constitution tasks the collectivity of Parliament with the process of introduction and consideration of such a bill. In this regard, and pursuant to Article 124 of the Constitution on the power to make standing orders for the orderly conduct of proceedings and business of the House, a procedure for these two processes ought to have been approved by the House. This obviously is not the case, as it lacks in our standing orders. Honourable members, the constitutional imperative to introduce and consider the bill and the lack of an express procedure in the standing orders for the same, informed by previous guidance on the manner and form in which the bill is to be introduced in this House. By extension, and pursuant to Standing Order Number 1, which allows the Speaker discretion to prescribe a procedure where none is applicable, I do note that the work of the House is largely executed by its committees, which recommend various actions to the House and inform debate on matters under its consideration. Members will note that the House has, through the second schedule to the standing orders, mandated the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs to consider the following subjects, and I quote, constitutional affairs, the administration of law and justice, including the judiciary, public prosecutions, elections, ethics, integrity, and anti-corruption and human rights, close the quotes. In this regard, honourable members, it is therefore my considered view that apart from facilitating public participation on the bill, the committee would also be best placed to move the various stages of the bill on behalf of the House. In providing this guidance, I hasten to add that I do not in any way ascribe ownership of the bill to the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of this House. I do also note that it would be unfair for members to hold the committee to the same standard that it would hold the mover of a bill who is a member of the House. In this regard, the committee will be executing a constitutional imperative on behalf of the House and not assume ownership of the bill. I would encourage the committee, while conducting public participation, to extend an invitation to the promoters of the bill for the promoters to exhaustively explain the philosophy behind the bill and its various proposals, as I do believe, as a matter of public authority, that they may not have had the opportunity to appear before the various county assemblies to do so. Honourable members, with regard to the second question on the limitation of debate during the consideration of the bill, you know that in my previous communications on this matter, I indicated the rigorous process that the Constitution attaches to a bill to amend the Constitution by popular initiative. Being the first time this House is scheduled to consider such a bill, I am cognizant of the fact that it shall elicit enormous interest from the members who naturally will want to participate during its consideration by the House. In order to allow sufficient and meaningful debate on the bill, there is need for the House to decide how speaking time will be allocated amongst its membership during debate on the bill. Consequently, in due course, the House Business Committee will be proposing a motion in this respect before the second reading of the bill. To conclude, I therefore direct as follows: that upon its first reading today, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, promoted by the BBI initiative, will stand committed to the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs for consideration and facilitation of public participation. The committee shall hold joint sittings with the Senate's Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs, and Human Rights. 2, that the Clerk of the National Assembly is directed to release an invitation for public participation on the bill immediately, and to note particularly the promoters of the bill as key participants. 3, that when the time comes, the motion for the second reading and the third reading of the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, popularly referred to as the BBI Constitution Amendment Bill, shall be moved by the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs. And finally, that at the appropriate time, the House Business Committee will be proposing a motion for the limitation of debate on the bill before its second reading. The House is accordingly guided, and I thank you, honourable members. Sorry, honourable members, sorry, let me make this. For the convenience of the House, honourable members, for the convenience of the House, and I think if you look at the supplementary order paper, there's business appearing as order number 8, which is a procedural motion, but there's also, and there's some business appearing as order number 10, which would flow naturally from order number 8. In between numbers 8 and 10, there is a motion which is for approval of some bill whose balance of activity that is remaining is putting of the question. And therefore, so as to not to cause a lot of unnecessary confusion, I have therefore decided to rearrange the business so that business appearing as order number 9 becomes order number 8, and what was order number 8 becomes order number 9, and the rest will follow. Thank you, no members.
So, order number 8, motion. Approval of the mediated version of the Early Childhood Education Bill, Senate Bill number 26 of 2018. Question to be put.
Honourable members, debate on this bill was concluded, and what remains is the question, which I hereby put. That pursuant to the provisions of Article 113, Clause 2 of the Constitution, and standing under number 150, this House adopts the report of the Mediation Committee on the Early Childhood Education Bill, Senate Bill number 26 of 2018, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, February 18, 2021, and approves the mediated version of the Early Childhood Education Bill, Senate Bill number 26 of 2018. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Order number 9, procedural motion. Introduction of the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, promoted by the Building Bridges Initiative, BBI.
Yes, Honorable Kimunya.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move following motion, procedural motion that noting that the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, popularly referred to as the Building Bridges Initiative Bill, was published in the Kenya Gazette on 25th of November 2020, whereas the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, submitted the draft bill between 27th of January 2021 and 2nd of February 2021 to each of the 47 county assemblies for their consideration in accordance with the provisions of Article 257, Subarticle 5 of the Constitution. Further, whereas, as at Tuesday, 2nd of March 2021, the draft Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill had been approved by a majority of county assemblies, therefore meeting the threshold set out in Article 257(7) of the Constitution for introduction in Parliament. Cognizant of the provisions of Article 257 of the Constitution requiring Parliament to expedite processing of a draft bill proposing to amend Constitution through popular initiative upon meeting the threshold set out in Article 257, subsection 7, and further cognizant of the guidelines and communication so far issued by the speakers of the Houses of Parliament with regard to the processing of a bill proposing to amend the Constitution through popular initiative in Parliament, particularly the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 promoted by the BBI. Now, therefore, this House notes the approval of the draft Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 by a majority of the county assemblies and affirms to expeditiously consider the said bill in keeping with the requirements of Article 257(7) of the Constitution. Honourable Speaker, as I move this motion, allow me first of all to clearly state at the very beginning that the intention of this motion is obviously not to debate the contents of the BBI report or even the BBI draft bill, if we refer it as such, in terms of its merits, its demerits, the contents. But instead, this motion is to facilitate some debate by the House in terms of the process of how we do it, so that we speak in one voice as a House, especially on matters that are not currently covered within the standing orders or within the law, but yet will be critical at this very stage, so that we are in tandem with the requirements of the Constitution that A, it should be introduced without delay, but most importantly, we also need to process it without delay so that the decision can then go to the people of Kenya. In any case, we can't debate a bill that has not been introduced in the House, and it will be introduced in a next order. But as I do that, I also want to alert members or remind members that sometime last year, towards the end of last year, I think it's within November, I did table in this House the full report of the Building Bridges Initiative. And I would like to urge members that even as we prepare to debate on this bill, it will be important for members to read the full report so that you can put things into proper context. Because the Constitutional Amendment Bill is only one or only a small part of the entire report. Honourable Speaker, I was honored, together with the Honourable Muturi Kigano, Honourable Junet Mohammed, and Senator Orengo, to be part of what was referred as an editorial team that reviewed and fine-tuned the Constitutional Amendment Bill within the report to come up with what we now have as the one that was then taken to IEBC. And I'm sure either of those people will be at hand to answer any of the issues members may have in terms of why some things are in where others are not. And we thank the promoters for giving us that opportunity. Now, as the House is aware, our standing orders only provide for bills, and you have explained very clearly, Honourable Speaker, in your communication, for only bills that have come through committees or through parliamentary processes. But for any bill that has come outside, our standing orders are rather silent. Our referendum, our current provisions for referenda within the Elections Act are also silent. And our referendum bill is still under processing. So we have some lacuna that we need to be guided on. And I want to thank you, Honorable Speaker, with your brother, the Honorable Speaker from the Senate, for the efforts you have put so far in guiding the House in these untested times when we are supposed to to process this without delay, yet we don't quite have the tools in terms of how to do it. And in the absence of a provision in the standing orders, luckily the framers of our standing orders provided for invoking standing order number 1 that gives you the power to guide this House so that we never have a situation where the House cannot move on account of lack of a provision in the standing orders on what to do. So I want to thank Honorable Speaker for that, and I want to also thank our technical team, our clerks, for having put in place the mechanisms for the verification of all those bills. As you rightly pointed out to us, some counties may have actually considered the premature bill, the bill that was considered, that was incorporated within the report. And that's why I want to draw the attention of members that even as you are considering the bill, to just note there's a difference between the bill contained within the report and the bill as sent to IEBC, so that we consider the bill that will be introduced on the floor of this House, whereas the rest of the report is good for background reading to put things into context. Honorable Speaker, I think the last time we had this kind of situation was during the Punguza Mizigo popular initiative, which had lots of inadequacies and gray areas. And I think these have helped in terms of lessons learned, and we've seen your pronouncement as partly coming from that. And I know, even as we go through this process, as people debate, even the debate in the Senate yesterday brought out some of the issues, and some of the debate this afternoon may bring some of the issues, so that by the time our JLAC committee retreats, and all of us are at liberty to also help them in their thinking, we will not only refine the process so that we give Kenyans the law or the process in a way that cannot be contested, but we also have clarified a few things for inclusion within our referendum bill by the time we bring it for that reading, because at least there's some live lessons learned through this process. So I want to invite the House to candidly discuss some of these things with a view of figuring out how we can positively influence and expedite the process. It's very clear that just like in petitions, Honorable Speaker, when a member has a petition here, they read it themselves. When a non-member or a stranger sends a petition, you read it and introduce it in the House yourself. And I believe this is a kind of same situation we are, that a bill has come from outside, and although Honorable Junet is listed as a promoter, we know he's only on behalf of a group of strangers under the BBI. And Dennis Wawero is not a member of the House. So the bill is technically coming here only through introduction by the IEBC, having been sent to this House. And hence, we cannot treat it in exactly the same way like we treat the others. We have first reading. We have so many days that are set in the law. It's constitutional. There's a 90 days. But there's nowhere that says a popular initiative should have 90 days or should actually be read, or whether we should be approving a report or approving a bill, or we all know we can't change it. So whether we take it through second reading and third reading, there's no change. So there's lots of small things that we want to be able to ventilate, then we put them together as part of this. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, I think what we need is to recognize that the promoters have gone through a process. They've met all the waypoints. They've had their signatures. They've gone, the bill has been taken to counties. They managed to convince all the counties at, 42, and I believe 43, 42 have reported here, but I believe 43 have actually passed the bill, which shows it's quite a bit of effort around the whole country. And we want to recognize all that effort, and then now it's our turn as a parliament to do a bit. And much as whether we pass it or not, it still goes ahead to the referendum. And members may then be asking, so why are we putting effort in discussing a bill, which it doesn't matter whether we pass it or not? But, honorable members, I believe the first thing is, I think within the drafting of the Constitution, it envisaged a situation where a bill could have issues that are not contained within, that are not listed within 255, which require referendum, in which case our debate here would have been the final point and it would have gone for assent. But because it contains issues and it's a choice of the promoters to bring it as one package, either way, it still has to go to a referendum. But this gives us an ideal opportunity as a House to not only reflect on the issues contained, but to put on record our own observations of the amendments, which can help at the referendum and also help in the future amendments, because as the representatives of the people who have this power given to us through Article 1 of the Constitution, the people can decide themselves or through the elected representatives. We are those elected representatives to think on behalf of the people and put on record, yes, do we agree with what the promoters are saying? If we agree, what else would you like to see as amendment? I know people are still talking out there that there's need for amendment, but the promoters are not available now to amend because it has left them. Now this bill is before us, and the only people who can make a decision on it is ourselves, and thereafter the people of Kenya. But any other person who feels there's an amendment that might be required in future, this will be the opportunity to get the debate from this House and can bring an amendment either directly through the House or as a future referenda, so that by and by we then go on with refining our Constitution to ensure that with this amendment, then a subsequent amendment, by the time we get to 27 amendments like the US, probably will have perfected it. So really, I don't want to, the import of this debate here today, which is hopefully brief, will be to just get a few remarks from some of, especially the seasoned members on the constitutionalism, on constitution making, that we can then have to guide the House and the committee, and most importantly, to support the decisions being made by our two speakers, who are also consulting heavily in terms of, the process, which is not written, it's not in the law, it's not in the standing order, so we must create it as we go. And so long as we are in agreement, then we are good to go. If there are any issues, then we should be able to resolve them and move in tandem, and that's what we're talking about between the two houses. Let me also thank I think it was yesterday we had a leadership meeting, and very productive with the joint meeting of the two houses. And we both agreed. Yes, there's not been much concurrence in the past, but we agreed to have joint sittings of the committees, as you reported, Honorable Speaker, because the public participation, the people who will be bringing papers, will probably be on the same issue. There's nothing for the Senate. There's nothing for National Assembly. It will be the same effective use of time, and hopefully we will be able to get through this process before the end of this month, and then we can allow the rest of the processing by the people in the referendum. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to urge this House to note the approval of the bill by the majority, and then affirm the expedited processing in accordance with the provisions of Article 257(7). And remember, we are doing it as a draft bill, and it's only after we pass it, then it becomes a bill that will then go to IEBC. If you look at 257(7) and 257(8), the distinction becomes very clear that the draft bill is coming before us. After we passed it, it becomes a bill. So again, it's thinking of the makers of the Constitution, the experts will tell us. But those 3 remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that we pass this motion and record, and we then want to request the leader of the minority party, who is my co-sponsor on this motion, to second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second this motion. Actually, I want to second the motion for introduction of the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, which has been promoted by Building Bridges Initiative. And this is a motion that has been co-sponsored by the Leader of Majority, the Honorable Dr. Amos Kimunya, and myself. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I want to just point out that the bill that we are likely to deal with shortly, Mr. Speaker, has been promoted by actually the first list that went to IBC was 4.2 million Kenyans, but even from the verified and authenticated list, over 3 million Kenyans have decided that they want the 2010 Kenyan Constitution amended in a particular manner. But, Mr. Speaker, these over 3.2 million Kenyans could not come here to prosecute and execute what they intend this House to deal with. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have belabored and discussed this issue. And I must say that, Mr. Speaker, we have really benefited a lot from you, especially your legal background and your deep understanding of the processes and procedures of Parliament in giving us the way forward and helping chart this course. And we felt that it was important that through a motion we have this draft bill introduced in this House, or allowed for introduction in the House. Mr. Speaker, allow me to congratulate those counties which have dealt with this bill, and more particularly the 43 or so counties which approved and agreed with the Kenyans, the 3-point-something Kenyans who wanted this bill, the Constitution, to be amended. That, Mr. Speaker, translates to 91.4% of all the counties in this republic. And, Mr. Speaker, that is an indication of overwhelming support that probably this draft bill is enjoying. How I hope that this House will also reflect that percentage in supporting the bill when it comes here. But, Mr. Speaker, I just want to continue by saying that we are expecting that the BBI Constitutional Amendment Bill will be introduced in this House for expedited processing pursuant to Article 257 of the Constitution. The question that arises is, why then are we expediting this processing? To answer this question, allow me, Mr. Speaker, to jog the memory of this House and take ourselves to the history of constitution making in Kenya. Many of us will remember, Mr. Speaker, or recall that through a national referendum, which was conducted on the 4th of August 2010, the people of Kenya unequivocally bequeathed to themselves and the successive generations the current constitution, which we call 2010 Constitution. The overarching principle that the people of Kenya entrenched in the new constitutional dispensation is the sovereignty of the people. It is on this background or backdrop that Article 1, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution allows the people to either exercise their sovereign power directly or donate it to their democratically elected representatives to exercise that power on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues would be wondering whether it was indeed necessary for me to have given that background. But, Mr. Speaker, what I am doing is to demonstrate to this House that there is a direct nexus between the sovereignty of the people, alluded to under Article 1 of the Constitution, and the process for amending the Constitution, which is enshrined in Chapter 16 of the Constitution. You will realize, Mr. Speaker, that Articles 256 and 257 of our Constitution provides for two distinct paths that may be taken to amend the Constitution. The first part is through parliamentary initiative, which we are at liberty to start at any time and at whatever level, and to amend any provision in the Constitution. And that is what Article 256 of the Constitution is all about. But the second part, which seems to be the one that we are now taking, is what we call the popular initiative, and it is provided for under Article 257 of the Constitution. It is therefore instructive, Mr. Speaker, for the House to note that the framing of Article 256 of the Constitution was intended to place the process of amending this Constitution through popular initiative within the exclusive sovereign power of the people. Mr. Speaker, sometimes I've heard some Kenyans argue that we are yet to fully implement this Constitution, and therefore, why do we amend it? Mr. Speaker, to fully implement this Constitution, even amending it through popular initiative or any other initiative, is a way to implement this Constitution, because one of the provisions in the Constitution is amendment to the Constitution. And if we successfully amend the Constitution through whichever initiative, then it is a demonstration that this Constitution is working. And so, Mr. Speaker, it flies in the face to argue to the contrary. That is why, no matter the action that Parliament may take on a draft bill of this nature, Mr. Speaker, and I'm talking about popular initiative, and Article 257.10 contemplates that, and I quote, that if either House or Parliament fails to pass the bill, or the bill relates to matters specified under Article 255.1 of our Constitution, the proposed amendment shall be submitted to the people in a referendum. Mr. Speaker, in a nutshell, if the people of Kenya have decided to amend the Constitution and collect enough signatures to convince IEBC that the minimum threshold has been met, therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is upon the people of Kenya in total and all of us to decide whether to carry the amendment or not. Nobody, Mr. Speaker, can use up the sovereign power of the people, Mr. Speaker, when they decide to amend their own constitution. And from a plain reading, Mr. Speaker, of the above provisions, it is clear in my mind that what is required of this House, and indeed the Senate, with respect to amending the Constitution through popular initiative, is the expedited processing of a bill, and therefore for the IBC to submit the same to the people of Kenya in an exercise where they are going to exercise their sovereign power through a referendum. And Mr. Speaker, at this point, allow me to echo the sentiments of the Leader of Majority and allow your counsel, Mr. Speaker, to the House, setting aside the delays that may have arisen should Parliament have opted to republish the BBI Constitutional Amendment Bill. And, of course, also to avoid unnecessary litigations that would have arisen. You know, BBI, much as it's enjoying good number of support, and I believe popular support in this country, it has also enough enemies, Mr. Speaker, and we have seen those enemies publicly. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, if we made any mistake in the processing of this bill, believe me, Mr. Speaker, we would have faced a lot of hurdles on the way. Mr. Speaker, on the strength of your ruling, delivered on Tuesday, 2nd March 2021, this House is now set to process the bill without delay as required in Article 257(7) of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, allow me not to forget to remind this House again that we are going to listen to Kenyans. We are going to have public participation. But again, the requirement of 257 is that this House cannot and has no powers at all to amend even a comma in this draft bill. And Mr. Speaker, when I hear some leaders talk out there in public rallies, are very knowledgeable Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, tell us that now it is in the hands of Parliament to amend the bill. I dare say, Mr. Speaker, that is an exhibition of total ignorance and confusion. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of maturity period, it is important for the House and indeed the general public to understand that the mis have as a notification to the House and indeed the general public that a certain bill was due to be introduced in the House. As a House, we have religiously respected this parliamentary tradition. However, with respect to the BBI Constitutional Amendment Bill, this tradition of adhering to the set maturity period for a bill would be of no value, given that it is a matter of public notoriety that the said bill has been in public domain long enough and beyond the stipulated 21 days, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with your direction that the bill be introduced in the form submitted to the county assemblies by the IEBC. This secures the integrity of the form and content of the bill from the IEBC and its journeys through the 47 county assemblies, the Houses of Parliament, and ultimately to the people for a decision. Mr. Speaker, we want to deal with one bill. From the time IEBC sent the bills to the 47 counties, the bill to the 47 counties, and the same bill was passed in the form and content with which it came from the IEBC to be introduced in this House and to go to the people of Kenya. We don't even want a comma to be changed. It should be the same bill, dated the same day, debated by all the 47 county assemblies, passed and debated by the two chambers of parliament, and therefore finally being taken to the people of Kenya after the president will have sent it to IBC. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I am impressed with the consultations that you and the Speaker of the Senate spearheaded last year and the guidelines you have severally given to the respective houses of parliament, but which have been jointly agreed to, ensure that the bicameral processing of the Constitution of Kenya Bill 2010 promoted by the Building Bridges Initiative in Parliament is expedited as required under Article 257 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, we have had several meetings, the last of which the Leader of Majority alluded to, which was yesterday, and we have basically, as leadership of Parliament, from both houses, we are totally in agreement, and of course, in consultation with our technical team, I want to thank the clerk's office, both houses, and the technical team, the legal department. They have enriched the discussion around how then would this House proceed with this exercise. This is a very important exercise for this country. I think this is the only time in this country we are experiencing the people of Kenya making a decision on their own to come together to amend the supreme law that governs them. The other cases were always initiated through processes which included Constituent Assembly, some people gathering together, members of parliament, people from various districts. I remember who came together in 2003, and even just slightly before 2003, it was disbanded. They were reconvened in 2003. It led to a failed referendum in 2005. We again started on a journey which led us to the 2010 Constitution. But this is the first time that Kenyans have collected enough signatures, and those signatures have counted in their various county assemblies. I know there is Punguza Mzigo, which also managed, I don't know through whatever method, because I didn't see them collecting signatures. But anyhow, I don't want to cast aspersion. They managed to get over 1 million signatures, but unfortunately for them, they did not manage the process after that very well, or they didn't have the capacity and the political might that is required to push through an agenda like this, and they failed miserably. I can't remember how many counties approved that bill, but I'm sure there were not more than 5. Mr. Speaker, coincidentally, some of those counties which approved Punguza Mzigo are probably the very few ones which are this time telling Kenyans we don't need to amend the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I want to end my contribution by urging this House and requesting this House to agree with us that we allow the introduction of this draft bill formally in this House. And Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I beg to second.
Members, I propose the question that noting that the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, popularly referred to as the Building Bridges Initiative Bill, was published in the Kenya Gazette on 25th of November 2020, whereas the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission submitted the draft bill between 27th of January 2021 and 2nd February 2021 to each of the 47 county assemblies for their consideration in accordance with the provisions of Article 257, Clause 5 of the Constitution. Further, whereas as of Tuesday, 2nd of March 2021, the draft Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 had been approved by a majority of the county assemblies, therefore meeting the threshold set out in Article 257, Clause 7 of the Constitution for introduction in Parliament. Cognizant of the provisions of Article 257, Clause 7 of the Constitution requiring Parliament to expedite processing of a draft bill proposing to amend the Constitution through popular initiative upon meeting the threshold set out in Article 257, Clause 7. Further cognizant of the guidelines and communication to the so far issued by the Speakers of the House of Parliament with regard to the processing of a bill proposing to amend the Constitution through popular initiative in Parliament, particularly the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, promoted by the BBI. Now, therefore, this House notes the approval of the draft Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 by a majority of the county assemblies and affirms to expeditiously consider the said bill in keeping with the requirements of Article 257, Clause 7 of the Constitution. Honorable Kioni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity to speak to this motion. And I want to say that I support the motion from the onset because, like you have said, and the mover and the second have said, this is certainly a unique thing. It's something that this Parliament has not done. It is a process that had not been provided for, perhaps with some little bit of further detail by the drafters of the Constitution. And it is important that this Parliament be part of what the Kenyans would want to do and what they have indicated they would want to do, and that is to get this process moving as quickly as possible and without us being or being seen to be an impediment of any nature. Mr. Speaker, I know I have had discussions and some talk shows of some people who want to say that the role of Parliament is totally unnecessary. In fact, I think one of them said that, I think he said this, anyway, he used a word that is not useful to have on the Hansard. But I think it is important that we accept and allow the process to go on. I want to support the sentiments that have been given by the leader of government business and or the leader of majority and the leader of minority, that we need to use the standing order number 1 to become a bit innovative and to think through quickly of how can we process this amendment bill through the popular initiative. Certainly, you have addressed the issues of why don't we need to do a publication again and again. It is without doubt we have to be careful. Those of us who can remember the constitution processes that we have gone through would remember in 1992 when we allowed some government printer work to be done, a comma was introduced, and that comma alone changed the whole debate and the whole direction the country wanted to take. So we need to be careful with such attempts to go back to the government printer, and especially when you can be able to see that it is not necessary. And I also remember that I believe that when we did the 2010 Constitution, by the time we left Naivasha, there was a sunset clause on some of the nominations that we continue having. But again, we lost it somewhere in between. So we have to be very careful with who do we trust the bill with after it has left and it's going through the mill. Mr. Speaker, I know that there is the call for public participation. And there is a question of why then public participation if what the public is going to tell us is not going to find its way in the bill. And I invite people to look at Article 118 and Article 201, where you have the public participation when you're dealing with public finance, and public participation when you're dealing with ordinary legislative agenda. And the purposes there seems to be some little difference. And when we go for public participation with a bill, we listen to the public, we take their views into consideration, but we also have an opportunity to see what should find its way into the bill or not. But this is a little unique because the bill has already been considered by the 47 or 42, 43 plus counties, and they have had their voice on it. So if then we come and try and amend it at whatever point, in my opinion, the counties will have a sound argument to say that what you are now processing is not what they passed, and you may need to refer it back to them for them again to agree with it. And we can never stop with this process. So I totally agree. Sorry? I totally agree that we need to allow the process to move on. And again, echoing the sentiment of the minority leader, the recognition of the sovereignty of the people. It is that which the people have given an okay to. They would want to see it all the way to the end without a lot of intellectual interference. So I think, Mr. Speaker, we need to agree and allow this process to move on. I want to thank you for the guidance that you have given us, given this process. The issue of having joint sitting between this House and the Senate is another useful innovation. When Parliament was working on the 2010 Constitution, we didn't have Senate, but we had the Parliamentary Select Committee, which was again composed of members of Parliament from all political parties, because we are dealing with a constitutional issue. It is not a thing that you want to deal with it from a section of the Parliament or section of representative. So it is good to have both houses speaking to this. Again, it will allow us to move on as quickly or move the process forward. Mr. Speaker, let me say that I think it is important that we also set our minds on the areas of the Constitution that requires to move a little ahead of the processes, like so that we don't find ourselves in the coming days with a similar scenario where we need to think on our feet as to what to do and how to process legislative agenda that come before us. I don't want to say much, but I remember, allow me to just remember that at the beginning of last year, when the first report of BBI came out, we became over ambitious as a CIOC, and we wanted to ask ourselves the questions that we're asking ourselves now. And perhaps in our little thinking, we may have come up with suggestions a little earlier, but we are where we are. We want to move on as a country. And as members of CIOC, we are happy that we are moving on. And I want to add my support to it. Where you think we are useful, we will be available. But if it is to continue the process that is, again, we are also available. But I thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I want to congratulate the 43 counties that have passed this bill. It is good to say thank you to them. And even the people who came out to sign on this document. Those 3+ million Kenyans, we need to thank them and support the process that they have. And finally, Mr. Speaker, is that the BBI report, having looked at it, has many other possible constitutional amendments that can come going forward. And I think it is upon this Parliament, and perhaps the coming Parliament, to take that leadership role and propose those amendments that can be done through Parliament without waiting for another, very expensive exercise to be learned through the country. I think we can play a more active role in the process of amending the Constitution, and in so doing, save the country some money, but again also help Kenyans implement the Constitution. And I agree with the minority leader in amending. We are still amending. We are still implementing the Constitution. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Tiende Molo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to support this motion, and I wish to express full concurrence with your guidance and ruling on this matter, based on the Constitution, usages, customs, and precedent, both in this country and other comparable jurisdictions. Mr. Speaker, it is true that the standing orders do not provide for a situation under Article 257, and therefore we must fall back to Standing Order number 1. Mr. Speaker, in doing so, we need to disabuse a few things that some people may have supposed. First of all, Mr. Speaker, it should be noted that this is not a situation where Standing Order number 129 applies. Standing Order number 129 that speaks of 90 days between the readings, because that standing order relates to an initiative under Article 256, and in fact, it copies the words of Article 256, 1C. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we should also disabuse the notion that some people have sold out there that we will require a supermajority to pass this bill. That is a 2/3 majority, which would be contemplated under Article 256 again. In this case, as expressly provided in Article 257(8), it is just a simple majority. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, it must be understood that we are not at liberty to amend the draft, and therefore suggesting that the amendments that can be brought within this House would be misleading the public. And the issue is very simple. Where it is an initiative, a popular initiative, which has been sanctioned, as in this case, by over 4 million Kenyans, we cannot be at liberty to adjust the thinking of those 4 million Kenyans. Ours is to do what we must do and then allow the people to express themselves in a referendum. Mr. Speaker, I welcome and thank you for the guidance in terms of the joint sittings of the National Assembly, Jailer Committee, and the Senate Jailer Committee. I want to confirm to you, Mr. Speaker, that we had already initiated informal consultations between the two committees, and your ruling now gives it a formal foundation on which to proceed. Mr. Speaker, it is also important to speak to the question of public participation. Mr. Speaker, it is important to do public participation, but it must be what I would call limited public participation. Limited, Mr. Speaker, first, because this is a process that has been on for 3 years. This is a process that saw the hand of over 4 million Kenyans signify their acceptance and willingness to be promoters. This is a process, Mr. Speaker, that has already gone to all the counties in this country, and 44 of the 47 counties have already formally signified their expression, 42 of them accepting and 2 rejecting. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, this is a process where the ultimate test of public participation will be the vote of the people in a referendum. And that is where, having considered everything, each and every Kenyan who is eligible to vote will vote either yes or no. It must be understood, Mr. Speaker, that that is the ultimate expression of sovereignty under Article 1, where the people themselves will now take their vote. This is to be contradistinguished with a situation where a matter is debated in this House and we pass it, and it either becomes law or not, depending on our vote. In such instances, the people do not usually have a say, but in this one, they would have a say. Mr. Speaker, that limited public participation will be the opportunity for the promoters to engage with the committees for a fuller and better understanding of the document. It is also the opportunity where the promoters will also engage with the committees, not just on the constitutional amendments, but the entire proposals in the BBI report, some of which require statutory bills and statutory amendments. And in which case, even as we are considering the constitutional amendment bill, then we would have the opportunity to initiate the processes that are necessary to enact those other bills. Mr. Speaker, in terms of timelines, I welcome and thank you for your directions in terms of the date by which the JLAC must report back to this House. And it is my understanding that the meat of the debate will actually be on that report. Mr. Speaker, I think that it is important that as the House Business Committee considers what the proposal in terms of limitation of timelines, I would urge them to have such consideration, noting that it would be important for us as a House not to detain this process. It would be really important that we get over and transmit the document to the IEBC before the end of March, so that the IEBC then can now set appropriate dates for the referendum. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I affirm and support this motion. Thank you.
I see the member for Kikuyu.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, maybe without injecting anybody, Honorable Speaker, the members who have contributed, the Chair, JLAC, the Chair CIOC, and the mover and the seconder, have articulated the issues very well, Honorable Speaker. And the guidance that you have given to the House is quite timely, and I'm sure many of us are agreed on this process, that there ought to be some guidance on how this process proceeds. And I'm happy that, including the Leader of Minority, Honorable John Buddy, has clarified that those who are seeking to promise people additional constituencies in public rallies may not have that opportunity, Honorable Speaker, through this House or elsewhere, Honorable Speaker, that what is contained in this bill will go as it is. But, Honorable Speaker, I wanted to raise on a point of order to ask, because for me, Honorable Speaker, the priority is the economy, and I see the Chair, Budget and Appropriations Committee has been very patiently seated here, waiting to move the BPS motion. I would be in order, Honorable Speaker, to request you to ask the mover to reply, Honorable Speaker, so that we may be able to proceed to the other more pressing priorities of the economy, Honorable Speaker. And with that, Honorable Speaker, I wish to request that if the House is in agreement, we do ask the mover to reply. Since it is a procedural motion on these matters, Honorable Speaker, we'll have more time to engage when this bill actually comes before the House, and ask the mover to reply, Honorable Speaker, so that we move to the more important business of the economy.
Well, you know, when a member claims that mover be called upon to reply, the speaker's role is merely to find out whether the House would be in agreement. So, do I get the sense that you want to do the BPS, or you want to do the procedural motion? because you know because there will be within the BPS you can speak a lot about many of these things. Honour members, let me just get the so, honour members, the member for Kikuyu has claimed that the mover be called upon to reply. And I put the question that the mover be called upon to reply. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as contrary opinion say no? No. Sorry, the ayes have it. Mover.
Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the contributors. Although few, but very weighty issues, and obviously the debate does not stop here. There will still be lots of opportunity to interact with the committee. There will be lots of opportunity within the public participation. But the good thing is that of all the people who spoken, there's total concurrence, especially reaffirming the faith they have in the decisions of the two speakers and the processes as continuing within the House. And I believe that concurrence, even if we had 10, 20 more people speaking, they would actually all be confirming the same. So I want to assume that those who have spoken on behalf of the entire House, and hence want to thank everyone, and let's get on with the business of expediting this process as envisaged by the framers of our Constitution. Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply.
Honourable members, even as I put the question of this procedural motion, I hope many of you were in the chamber when I did my earlier communication. The second point was how much time do we allow for the debate on this bill when finally the report is brought by the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. And if you recall, I did indicate that there may be necessity for the House Business Committee to consider extending the period, the time each member contributes, because this is a very weighty matter, a matter to deal with a constitution amendment, and it is not fair that we just remain to stick to the 3 minutes or 5 minutes. But of course, that will also have some bearing on some of the other business that is before the House. But I think it's important in my view, and we agreed in House Business that there may be need for us to pass a special motion allowing for slightly more time than normal, so that each and every member who has something to say about this very, very important bill is given an opportunity or has a chance to have their name on the Hansard. It is history. So it may be important that the House Business Committee considers extending the number of minutes that each contributor gets. Sometimes it has started to appear that on account of our numbers, because we are 349, if you go to secondary schools, that will be more than a double intake class, double stream school, if each class has 40 students. So you can imagine that sometimes we want to adjust our times. We give ourselves 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes 3 minutes, merely because of the numbers. But I think sooner than later, I believe the members are going to rise to the occasion and maybe extend the sitting hours up to around midnight or 2 a.m. So that we can accommodate the large numbers that the Honorable Pukosa suggests, especially when we get to 640, if we ever get to that kind of number. So it may be necessary to sit throughout the day and night. There could be night sittings and day sittings. Yeah. So, honourable members, I therefore will put the question on this procedural motion that noting that the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, popularly referred to as the Building Bridges Initiative Bill, was published in the Kenya Gazette on 25th of November 2020, whereas the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, IEBC, submitted the draft bill between 27th of January 2021 and 2nd of February 2021 to each of the 47 county assemblies for their consideration in accordance with the provisions of Article 257, subsection 5 of the Constitution. Further, whereas, as of Tuesday, 2nd March 2021, the draft Constitution Amendment Bill 2020 had been approved by a majority of the county assemblies, therefore meeting the threshold set out in Article 257, Clause 7 of the Constitution for introduction in Parliament. Cognizant of the provisions of Article 257, Clause 7 of the Constitution, requiring Parliament to expedite processing of a draft bill proposing to amend the Constitution through popular initiative upon meeting the threshold set out in the said article and Clause 7, and further cognizant of the guidelines and communications so far issued by the Speakers of the House of Parliament with regard to the processing of a bill proposing to amend the Constitution through popular initiative in Parliament, particularly the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 promoted by the BBI. Now, therefore, this House notes the approval of the draft Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 by a majority of the county assemblies and affirms to expeditiously consider the said bill in keeping with the requirements of Article 257, Clause 7 of the Constitution. Will as many as for that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 10, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Constitution by popular initiative.
Well, we don't have to put the question on our members. I've already directed. No, even ordinarily, we don't put questions. So it stands committed to the direction given to the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee to hold public sittings jointly with the equivalent committee in the Senate, and that the clerk issues the relevant notices and publications as appropriately directed. Next order.
Order number 11, motion, consideration of the 2021 budget policy statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I request, Mr. Speaker, if I can relax my mask with your leave, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the 2021 budget policy statement and medium-term debt management strategy laid on the table of the House on Thursday, March 4th, 2021, and A, approves the 2021 budget policy statement and medium-term debt management strategy. B, further makes the policy resolution contained in the first schedule to the order paper. C, approves the budget ceiling for the financial year 2021 to 2022 as set out in the second schedule of the order paper. And D, further resolves that the budget policy statement so approved forms the basis for the introduction of the Division of Revenue Bill 2021. Honorable Speaker, as I move, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank this House that it is only a fortnight ago that this House passed and approved the list of the new members of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. And I would also want to bring to the attention of the House that the committee retreated, elected a vice chair unopposed, who is Honorable Bernard Masaka Shinali, the MP for Ikolomani, and myself as the chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Honorable Speaker, as I move, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the members. The document that we have today was signed by 26 out of 27 members. That shows the level of commitment, Mr. Speaker, of the new members of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Honorable Speaker, I'll try to be as brief as possible so that we can also give members an opportunity to contribute on the same. Honorable Speaker, Section 25(7) and Section 33(1) of Public Finance Management Act 2012, as well as Standing Order 232(7), requires the Budget and Appropriations Committee to scrutinize the budget policy statement and the medium-term debt strategy paper. It is, therefore, my pleasant duty and honor to present to this House the committee's report on the two aforementioned policy statements for the financial year 2021-2022 and the medium term. Honorable Speaker, the 2021 BPS and MTDS have been prepared at a time when the global economy is grappling with the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing containment measures. Domestically, Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan economy has experienced a significant income productivity losses arising from the pandemic. Indeed, by the end of the third quarter of 2020, the Kenyan National Bureau of Statistics estimates that over 3 million Kenyans were unemployed. These income and job losses were mostly in the informal sector, which employs approximately 80% of Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, the BPS 2021 has outlined priority pro-growth policy measures for the 2021-2022 budget that are aimed at stimulating economic recovery in the post-COVID-19 period. This is in addition to the continued implementation of the NTP 3 projects, as well as the Big Four agenda. The theme of the 2021 BPS is Building Back Better, Strategy for Resilient and Sustainable Economic Recovery. It's called the Bounce Back Ability. Honorable Speaker, the 2021 BPS and the medium-term debt strategy 2021-2022 to 2023-2024 was submitted to Parliament and tabled on the floor of the House on the 11th of February 2021. That is pursuant to Standing Order 232, 5 and 6. The BPS was promptly committed to the Budget and Appropriations Committee, as well as the departmental committees who are required to deliberate on the documents in line with their respective mandates and make recommendations to the Budget and Appropriations Committee. On the other hand, the medium-term debt management strategy paper was committed to the Budget and Appropriations Committee, where it was examined and discussed. The committee, Mr. Speaker, held stakeholders consultation with the National Treasury, Central Bank of Kenya, the Commission on Revenue Allocation, also to discuss critical aspects of the BPS in the context of the state of the economy. Further discussions were held with the Ministry of Health, Agriculture, Livestock and Cooperatives, Industry, Trade and Enterprise Development to review the status of the Big Four projects. The committee also held meetings with the PSC, the Office of the Auditor General, to review their budgetary needs for the coming financial year. On the same note, Mr. Speaker, we also did a meeting with the liaison committee that composed, of course, of the Deputy Speaker and all the chairs, Mr. Speaker. Thereafter, the Budget and Appropriations Committee held very fruitful deliberations with the departmental committees and received their recommendations on the Budget Policy Statement 2021. Further discussions were also held with the National Treasury before this report was finalized. The recommendations arising from these discussions are contained in this report. Once as approved, Mr. Speaker, by this House, the BPS recommendations will form the basis for the finalization of the 2021-2022 budget pursuant to Section 25(8) of the PFM Act and PFM Regulations 27, and of course the standing orders, our own standing orders 232.10. On the other hand, the medium-term debt management strategy is expected to inform the country's borrowing plan over the medium term. Honorable Speaker, after those deliberations, we came up, Mr. Speaker, with key recommendations. One, on the policy recommendations and also financial recommendations. And Mr. Speaker, from the order paper, we have clearly enumerated the recommendations that we came up with. But just to highlight, Honorable Speaker, some of the key recommendations the committee recommended. The committee recommended, Mr. Speaker, that one, that the National Treasury to develop a policy to enable the reduction of unproductive and non-target tax waivers and tax breaks in order to protect revenue. This should be submitted to Parliament alongside the financial year 2021-2022 budget estimates by 30th April 2020. Honorable Speaker, we need to get revenue, and the revenue is gotten from taxes. But you have seen in the past whereby there are some tax waivers, exemptions, which are completely needless. That is what we want to check, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury should also review compendium of the government projects and consider deferment of new projects by one financial year while ensuring adequate counterpart funding and provision of funds for stalled projects before finalization of budget estimates for the financial year 2021-2022. Mr. Speaker, starting with our own house, Mr. Speaker, we are paying over 400 million shillings on rent to KICC. We are also paying about another 60 million to other private offices for members of parliament. And we are doing that, Mr. Speaker, basically because the office block that is supposed to be occupied by members of parliament is not complete. But, Mr. Speaker, the committee, my committee, has committed to provide enough resources to make sure that by October, the new block, the office block for the members of parliament will be complete and ready for occupation. We want to lead by example, Mr. Speaker. By September of this year, Mr. Speaker, we want to lead by example. The government, each and every year, spends billions of shillings in rent, renting private offices. That is something that we also want to clearly say that there are so many stalled projects, Mr. Speaker. We first of all want to complete those stalled projects. Mr. Speaker, the third one is that during the finalization of the budget estimates for the financial year 2021, the National Treasury should take into account the pending bills and ensure that these are adequately provided for within the approved expenditure. CDF also falls under this. And we have actually said, we have all the time said that the first charge should always be pending bills. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this one has not been happening. And we have over years, the government has accumulated billions of shillings in terms of pending bills. There are so many people, Mr. Speaker, who are suffering out there. They provided services, they provided goods to government, both in the national government and also in the county government. But now they are being auctioned. And their only reason was to provide services and goods to government and government agencies. So we want to tell them that the first charge at all times should be pending bills. And moving forward, we will be very, very strict, Mr. Speaker, on that. Mr. Speaker, we also took time because an issue yesterday was raised on the floor of the House that the Treasury has not released funds to the NGCDF board. And we were told, Mr. Speaker, that 26 billion shillings has been released to the National Government CDF board. The issue is whether that fund is for the current year or for the arrears. That is an issue, of course, that we need the committee to also bring to this House. But 26 billion shillings, Mr. Speaker, has been released to the NGCDF board. Mr. Speaker, I also want to hasten and say there are also some members here, Mr. Speaker, who have also been complaining that they have not received their funds. Yet, they have not even submitted, Mr. Speaker, their proposals for their constituencies. I am informed, Mr. Speaker, that there are members who provided their proposals a week ago, Mr. Speaker, and they have been waiting for money to come to their constituencies. How will the money go to the constituencies without providing, Mr. Speaker, the proposals? Mr. Speaker, that's an issue that we are also taking seriously, and they have also committed, the National Treasury has also committed that each and every week they will be releasing 2 billion shillings, and if the revenue collection improves, they also be able to improve and make sure that they clear the backlog. Mr. Speaker, the fourth one, the National Treasury should restructure state-owned enterprises, especially the highly indebted ones who are unable to meet their operation costs with a view of privatizing some of them. Honorable Speaker, this House passed the Privatization Commission, I think Act or something. We have a board, and I think, Mr. Speaker, that board is asleep because we need to privatize most of these parastatals, which of course are milking the government every other day, but they are not economically viable. Mr. Speaker, the government has no business doing business, Mr. Speaker, and that should be put very, very clearly that moving forward, some of the agencies that are not making profit each and every year will not be funded from the exchequer. Mr. Speaker, we also propose that regard to the sectorial policy recommendations, this House approves the attached Annex 1, which provides a list of all policy recommendations drawn from Annex 2, which is the summary of the departmental committee observations and recommendations, and have been discussed and approved by the committee. Mr. Speaker, we took into consideration all the recommendations that were brought forward by the departmental committees. Mr. Speaker, and I really want to thank the chairs of the various departmental committees. Mr. Speaker, the last committee that came before us presented to us on Friday. No, it's not now Friday. It was actually Friday at past midnight. So we went up to 2 a.m. So I want also to thank the various departmental chairs for their commitment, together also with the members. Honorable Speaker, we are also having other recommendations underpinning the fiscal framework. And with this regard, Mr. Speaker, I want to report that the revenue target for the financial year 2021-2022 be set no less than 2.034 trillion shillings, with ordinary revenue target being 1.75 trillion shillings. Honorable Speaker, the fiscal deficit, including grants, Mr. Speaker, approved by Parliament for the financial year 2021-2022 is pegged at Kenya shillings 930 billion shillings, or 7.5% of GDP, whichever is lower. Any increase, and I want to repeat, any increase of the fiscal deficit beyond what has been approved in the BPS for the financial year 2021-2022 will not be approved by Parliament. Mr. Speaker, we are doing this because we want to reduce this appetite of borrowing, Mr. Speaker, and borrowing without, of course, the express permission of or concurrence with this House. Mr. Speaker, we are also encouraging Treasury to also have the fiscal consolidation, Mr. Speaker, which will, of course, improve the fiscal policies that we have in the country. Mr. Speaker, the third one, consistent with the debt mix that ensures that there is low cost and also minimize the risk. The net foreign financing be limited, Mr. Speaker, to 530 billion shillings, while the net domestic finance be set at Kenya shilling 399.9 billion shillings. Honorable Speaker, I also want to move very quickly to the financial recommendations, Mr. Speaker. And on the financial recommendations, one, that the ministerial expenditure underpinning the program for the financial year 2021-2022 be limited to no more than 1.30 trillion shillings for the recurrent and 658.9 billion shillings for development expenditure. Two, that the ceiling for Parliamentary Service Commission and judiciary be set at 37.88 billion shillings and 17.91 billion shillings, respectively. Honorable Speaker, the third one, that the expenditure ceiling for the financial year 2021-2022 budget be approved as per the attached Schedule 2. These ceilings shall be binding, and the National Treasury should prepare the budget estimates with these binding constraints. Mr. Speaker, we have seen in the past where the BPS has absolutely no nexus or no connection with the budget estimates. We want, and we have said categorically, that the annual estimates or the annual estimates should be a replica, yeah, or closely related to the BPS. Honorable Speaker, the fourth one, that having considered the unfunded requests from the departmental committees amounting to 240 billion shillings, the committee has identified critical expenditure needs that require urgent funding, Mr. Speaker, amounting to 45.5 billion shillings as per the attached Schedule 1. More importantly, any revenue-raising measures contained in the financial year 2021-2022 finance bill shall also be earmarked to fund the aforementioned priority areas. Mr. Speaker, we had long deliberations. You know, Mr. Speaker, moving from 240 billion requests from the various departmental committees to 45 billion shillings was a lot of concession. So we also put it as part of the wish list, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the fifth one is that the county government be allocated, Honorable Speaker, 409.88 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, this is a great improvement from the last financial year, which of course the county government equitable share shall be 370 billion shillings, moving from the current 316. Honorable Speaker, number 6, that the allocation of the equalization fund be at 6.8 billion shillings, be approved as provided in the budget policy statement. And 7, Mr. Speaker, that once approved by this House, these recommendations, together with the Schedule 1 and 2 attached, shall form the basis for the financial year 2021-2022 budget. Mr. Speaker, I reiterate again that the BPS should inform the budget estimates of 2021-2022. We don't want to see a situation whereby there is a total difference between the BPS and also the annual estimates. Mr. Speaker, finally, we also had recommendations on the medium-term debt management strategy. Mr. Speaker, on this one, I will just highlight a few of them, Mr. Speaker. And for avoidance of doubt, after consultation with the National Treasury, the committee has approved a debt mix ratio of 57 to 43 of domestic to external borrowing as provided for in the MTDS. This strategy provides the optimal debt and is also consistent with the key provision of Section 50 of the PFM Act. Specifically, the law requires that the national government shall ensure that its financing needs and payment obligations are met at the lowest possible cost in the market, which is consistent with a prudent risk of management while ensuring that the overall level of public debt is sustainable. Mr. Speaker, we are impressed that currently the government does not have that high appetite on commercial debts and is more on the concessional debts, and we are happy that is the road that, of course, we want the country to be. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, that the National Treasury should stick to its plan to reduce the stock of the Treasury bills by 200 billion shillings. Honorable Speaker, in the next 30 days following the adoption of this report, the National Treasury should also report to the National Assembly how it has been able to achieve the report, also on the progress on average time to maturity on domestic debt. Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank your good office, Mr. Speaker, the office of the clerk, the office, my committee, Mr. Speaker, and we extend the gratitude to all the ministries, departmental agencies, commission.
There's a point of order for the member for Kikuyu.
Honorable Speaker, sorry I didn't want to interrupt the chair, but I realized before he finishes he may have forgotten something. We had agreed that he would make a correction, that on the financial recommendations, an inconsistency on the financial and policy recommendations on the debt financing. Just to remind him, because it is a matter of figures, Honorable Chair, and what we resolve and we pass here, Honorable Speaker, is what will go into the records. Because if you look at the financial resolutions, 2, he's referring to, no, 3. He's referring to a net foreign financing of 530 billion and net domestic financing of 399, about 400 billion. While when you go to the policy recommendations, that mix is at the ratio of 57 to 43 on domestic to foreign. So the correction, I think the chair can just correct that for purposes of records.
Yeah, and Chair, I will also be giving you some extra time because I also say something on the last page of the second schedule. Gross budget estimates for financial year 2020-2021. So I'll add you some extra minutes so that you can address both of those issues.
Thank you so much, Honorable Speaker. I think I was constrained on time, and that's true, Your Excellency, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, and the Swanky Emeritus Chair, my good friend Kimani Chungwa. Thank you so much for the correction, and that is true on the financial resolution 3. And I want to correct so that it is on record that consistent with the debt mix that ensures that there is a low and minimum risk, net foreign financing be limited to Kenya shillings, 399.9 billion shillings, while the net domestic financing be set at 530 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, that's a correction. And I want it also to be on record, Mr. Speaker, also on what you have indicated, Mr. Speaker, that's true, is a typo, and I think it happens. Yeah, Honorable Member, Mr. Speaker, that's true that the gross budget estimates for the financial year 2021-2022. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move, Honorable Speaker, and ask my good friend, the leader of minority, to second.
Honorable John Bandi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I second, I want to start by first congratulating the members of various departmental committees who actually looked at the budget policy statement and did a good job in presenting their report to the Budget and Appropriations Committee. I also want to thank the membership of the Budget and Appropriations Committee for doing a good job in getting this report done in record time. Mr. Speaker, I want to just mention the following, that the Fiscal Management Act of 2009 required the government to submit the budget policy statement to Parliament for review and approval. And again, this was re-emphasized under PFM Act 2012. But Mr. Speaker, the mood and the spirit of this requirement has not been carried to the BPS. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind this House and maybe inform the House that one country that has a long history with BPS, or budget policy statement, is New Zealand. But Mr. Speaker, if you look at the report, the BPS of that country for this year, it is just 28 pages. Ours, Mr. Speaker, is 143 pages. Mr. Speaker, those who like reading could go and try to read the BPS of the New Zealand and ours. And Mr. Speaker, I want to describe our BPS as a forest of words, but a desert of policies and strategies. Mr. Speaker, number one, I want to, the challenge that I'm giving the BPS is on the issue of interpretation of statutes and the financial implication. Mr. Speaker, the law underpinning national government CDF, or Constituency Development Fund, provides that at least 2.5% of ordinary revenue should be appropriated to be credited to national government CDF funds for disbursement to constituencies. But Mr. Speaker, almost every year, the national government CDF fund is never fully disbursed. PFM Act 2012, Mr. Speaker, provides that any commitments that are legally payable and remain unpaid in a financial year should form first charge in the next financial year. But when projects funded by CDF are not issued with the exchequer by the end of the financial year, they should be funded in the next financial year. It therefore follows that when we appropriate for a new financial year, the amount for the current year and those arrears for previous years should be always taken into consideration. Applying the law properly, Mr. Speaker, it would actually mean that 26 billion that has been disbursed so far this year, which has been issued, is still financing projects of the previous year. It is unfortunate that the executive, and in particular the National Treasury, is interpreting the law to suit it themselves, Mr. Speaker. The second one is with regards to what we call the Road Maintenance Levy Fund. Mr. Speaker, the proposal from the Treasury is to remove this fund now, the 15% that goes to counties, from being a conditional grant to a shareable revenue fund. Mr. Speaker, what that means, therefore, that there's nothing that will force the counties to apply the 15% from the road maintenance levy in maintaining our roads. And what is the effect of that? The counties can even use that money in buying tea, fueling the cars, and other operation expenses, and our roads will continue to deteriorate because there will be no maintenance. But, Mr. Speaker, allow me to talk about my pet area, that is the debt servicing. Mr. Speaker, servicing of public debt has come home to roost. Mr. Speaker, you remember that there is no any single year that I've ever stood in this House talking about how we are reaching levels of debt and sustainability. It is the only expenditure, Mr. Speaker, that is increasing, followed by that expenditure on defense and security-related entities. I stand here again, Mr. Speaker, to shout loudly that we have been borrowing to finance recurrent expenditure. Mr. Speaker, figures don't lie. on a yearly basis, at least between 2 and 5% of our current expenditure is financed through borrowing, Mr. Speaker. And this is why we are back now to IMF, Mr. Speaker, where we are being subjected to performance criteria and where we have to report on certain actions. Mr. Speaker, I want to just talk straight to Jubilee government, Mr. Speaker. I've heard none other than the deputy leader of the Jubilee party, the deputy president, talk about rising debt and saying that there is debt unsustainability. How I wish that the Honorable William Ruto listened to some of us early enough. Mr. Speaker, when Jubilee government took power in 2013, in June 2013, the debt level in this country was 1,894 billion, 1.8 trillion. Mr. Speaker, by the end of 2018 June, in a period of just 5 years, Mr. Speaker, the debt level had risen to 5,047,234 million. Mr. Speaker, that is an increase within 5 years of 3.15 trillion. Mr. Speaker, it took us 50 years to reach 1.8 trillion debt level. And it took us only 5 years to add to that debt level by 3.153 trillion. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this House back to some statistics. From June 2010 to June 2011, the increase in debt for that year alone was just 260 billion. The following year, the increase was 260 billion again. The following year, the increase was less than 240 billion. But, Mr. Speaker, immediately Jubilee came to power, the increase has been over 600 billion every year. Mr. Speaker, immediately Jubilee came to power in April 2013. Every financial year, the debt level has been increasing on an average of 631 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, the plain truth is no one in Jubilee can run away from causing this country to the debt level we are in today. In fact, before you talk to Kenyans, the first thing you must do is to apologize to Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, the Deputy President should apologize to Kenyans for causing this increased debt level before he even complains about the rising debt level. Figures don't lie, Mr. Speaker. The problem we are facing today is as a result of appetite of borrowing by Jubilee government. Mr. Speaker, this appetite was informed with populist projects, some of which were not adding value to this country. How many times did we complain about borrowing money, Eurobond, to clean streets of Kibera? Much as it is important to live in a clean environment. But who goes to bank to borrow money to come and slash or clean the compound? Nobody. Mr. Speaker, we borrowed money for corruption. We borrowed money to finance dams that don't exist. Mr. Speaker, we borrowed money to eat KEMSA scandal. It's part of the loans we will be paying. And these Kenyans who have stolen this money are in this country. Look at some of them appearing before committees of parliament and saying God directed them to KEMSA. KEMSA, Mr. Speaker. How can Kenyans, have a negative attitude towards other Kenyans? How can you tell us that God directed you to go and steal in KEMSA, Mr. Speaker? Which God is this? It's not the God that I worship every day and go to church every Saturday. Mr. Speaker, if we have to help this country, we have to go back and see where the rain started beating us. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Kanini Kega has talked about it, the chair of my committee. This financial year and the last financial year, We have been borrowing money at 0 interest rates. Previously, we were borrowing money we were taking commercial loans. This is the first year that at least IMF, with their conditions and conditionalities, is giving us 78 billion at 0 interest rate, repayable in 30 years. This is the first time that World Bank is giving us 82 billion shillings to pay at 1.4% for a longer period of time. This is the first time that ADB Bank is giving us 22 billion to pay at below 2% interest rate. Mr. Speaker, from 2013, we were borrowing money to pay at 7-8% interest rates. We were out there organizing road shows like we are in Kondele Market, trying to look for people to give us money. And Mr. Speaker, nobody could listen in this government. I'm grateful that now at least Uhuru Kenyatta is listening to us, the president of this country. Please continue listening to us. Don't listen to people like your deputy, Mr. Speaker, because a long-lost direction, they don't know where this economy is heading. That is why they are talking things they don't understand. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude my contribution by asking, this budget policy statement is a business-as-usual document. Mr. Speaker, you'll give me just 1 minute. While we appreciate as Kenyans that we have resigned to the fate of Hakuna Pesa slogan, it is important that the government gives us hope through the document they release. For how long, Mr. Speaker, will the youth continue getting handouts through Kazi Mtaani, Mr. and through wheelbarronomics kind of politics? Mr. Speaker, we want a strategy that will help expand the manufacturing sector to employ the youth of this country. We don't want Kazi Mtaani, we don't want wheelbarronomics, we want real job creation in this country. And Mr. Speaker, this is not politics. Kazi Mtaani is being championed by Jubilee government. Wheelbarronomics is being championed by Jubilee B, which is now UDA. So it cuts across. We don't want wheelbarronomics. We don't want Kazi Mtaani. We want real jobs for our youth. The digital economy that this country was promised in 2013. We were promised digital economy. We were called analog. Mr. Speaker, now the analog is becoming digital. The digital is going with wheelbarronomics. Mr. Speaker, this country, we need to be serious with ourselves. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I second.
Honourable members, obviously, even as a chamber and as a house, you cannot always feed just with on one diet only. So you need from time to time to get something that can help you balance and grow. Even children have to play, among other things, even as much as they go to learn in school. Honourable members, I now propose a question, which is that this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the 2021 Budget Policy Statement and Medium-Term Debt Management Strategy, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, March 4th, 2021, and A, approves the 2021 Budget Policy Statement and Medium-Term Debt Management Strategy. B, further makes the policy resolutions contained in the first schedule to the order paper. C, approves the budget ceilings for financial year 2021-2022 as set out in the second schedule to the order paper. And D, further resolves that the budget policy statement so approved forms the basis for the introduction of the Division of Revenue Bill 2021. Honorable Ishongwa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Can hear the leader of minority whisper wheelbarronomics. We'll be teaching him about wheelbarronomics and how that, Honorable Speaker, will change the structure of our economy. Because, Honorable Speaker, even as I rise to support this BPS, Honorable Speaker, you will realize, Honorable Speaker, that we are being asked by the Budget and Appropriations Committee to approve a BPS that they say by the time we are going into the annual estimates, Honorable Speaker, probably later this year in April, that we have a deficit of about 7.5%. And Honorable Speaker, how I wish, Honorable Speaker, that this deficit would be reduced to the levels of 6 to 7%. And I would really implore on the Budget and Appropriations Committee to get the National Treasury to reduce this budget deficit to a level of at least 6 to 7%. And that way, some of the issues that the Leader of Minority has mentioned, including the question of public debt and the debt borrowing, and I'm happy the Leader of Minority, Honorable John Badi, now concedes that if indeed they are being listened to, and by that I meant, I'm sure he meant ODM, the party he's chair of. And a member of that party, the Honorable Professor Dr. Nyikal, once described government as the president and the people the president listens to. Therefore, if you want a definition of government today, then, Honorable Speaker, in line with Professor Nyikal's definition, then is the president and the people he's listening to. That is the people Honorable John Badi is alluding to. And we are looking at a budget policy statement, Honorable Speaker, that we are being asked to approve, that is looking at a deficit, as the chair has alluded to, of 7.5% of our GDP and an absolute figure of about 930 billion. Honorable John Badi went to great lengths to enumerate the 240, 260, 280 billion shillings that was being borrowed between 2010 and 2013. But today, the government, as it is today, is seeking an approval of 930 billion
Nyamai,
shillings.
The Honorable Ishungwa, just hold on. What is out of order, the Honorable Nyamai?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. What is not in order, Honorable Speaker, is that the Honorable Ichungwa is speaking very powerfully behind me. And is actually, I am just ashamed to say that he's kind of spitting on me, and he's been attending Tanga meetings without wearing a mask. Honorable Speaker, I feel unsafe.
The Honorable Rachel Nyamai, you are absolutely right. The Honorable Ishungwa, dress up.
Okay. Honorable Speaker.
I just want to assure you that you do not need to worry that the president is not listening to you. I can assure you he's listening to you. This is the House of Parliament.
Honorable Speaker, without seeking to engage with you, because I am not at liberty to do that, I am now dressed up in terms of a mask. The other issues as to whether I'm being listened to, it is not relevant to me at this particular point, Honorable Speaker. I want to focus on the issues that I was addressing. That indeed, Honorable Speaker, the Leader of Minority has enumerated the level of our public debt. Today, we are being asked to approve further borrowing of 930 billion shillings, 70 billion shillings shy of 1 trillion shillings, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, in the past, and I have belabored this point in many forums, Honorable Speaker, that this House is asked every year to approve this budget policy statement. And the chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, and I think the Leader of Minority have also alluded to that fact, that we approve a BPS here and expect that the annual estimates will be done in line with this BPS. But that never happens, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, if you look at the debt mix that we were talking about, Honorable Speaker, the one that the chair just corrected, Honorable Speaker, we are talking, if you look at the BPS, the inconsistency between BPS and the medium-term debt strategy paper, the BPS alluded to a net borrowing of about 72%, vis-a-vis the 57% that is in MTDS. MTDS is talking about 43% of net foreign funding. BPS is at a level of about 28 or 27.8%, Honorable Speaker. And these inconsistencies, Honorable Speaker, will manifest themselves further when you come to the annual estimates. And most likely, Honorable Speaker, you will find that the annual estimates will be done more in line with what is in the BPS and not the medium-term debt statement, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, when you talk about approving a BPS with a very huge deficit, Honorable Speaker, and we then go ahead and do our annual estimates based on that, naturally, Honorable Speaker, the debt that we are envisaging to borrow of 930 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker, I will not be shocked if by this time next year, Honorable Speaker, we'll be talking of debt levels of close to, or if not above, 1 trillion shillings, Honorable Speaker. I am wondering whether we still have space within the debt ceiling, and most likely, in the course of this year, we'll be seeing the National Treasury coming back to this House seeking a review of the debt ceiling beyond the 9 trillion shillings. Therefore, it is not right, Honorable Speaker, to just accuse the Jubilee government of doing things, yet those of us who sit in this House, the National Assembly and not the Senate, Honorable Speaker, we sit here and approve these figures. Honorable John Buddy is seated in the committee today. The President is listening to him. He is seated in the Budget and Appropriations Committee approving 930 billion shillings of debt, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, and I will beg that you add me the minute that I was interrupted. Honorable Speaker, the road maintenance fuel levy, if you look at page 19 of the report, Honorable Speaker, there is a very huge problem, Honorable Speaker, because we have taken the road maintenance fuel levy fund and taken it as part of our shareable revenue going to the county governments. And we are being dishonest, Honorable Speaker, with the people and with the county governments. The Fuel Levy Fund Act of 1993, I think, stipulates that these funds should go specifically to maintaining of roads in our constituencies and in our counties, Honorable Speaker. When we lump these figures as part of our shareable revenue, Honorable Speaker, it is possible that governors will now utilize this money in other areas away from maintenance of roads. And that will be very detrimental even to us as members of parliament, because the pressure will come back to us to be able to maintain those rural roads that are not being done, Honorable Speaker, by the county governments. Honorable Speaker, for me, in closing, Honorable Speaker, I would want to speak about the realism of our revenue estimates, Honorable Speaker. We are talking about revenue estimates of 1.775 trillion. In an economy today that this financial year, Honorable Speaker, we have reviewed downwards to 1.594 trillion, Honorable Speaker. An economy that is on its knees, Honorable Speaker. I do not know what magic will be there. With the structure that we have, Honorable Speaker, we are relying largely on manufacturing, ICT, and financial services in generation of revenue, Honorable Speaker. What is it that we are doing with the wheelbarronomics that John Budd is talking about? And that is where we are talking about the bottom-up approach, where even the agricultural sector that is contributing on average 34% of GDP in the last 3 years and only contributing about 2% of revenue generation, Honorable Speaker, that using a...
Very well. I had already added you a minute, the Honorable Member for Kikuyu. The Honorable Bayaya, Member for Kilifi North.
I wasn't prepared for that. Thank you, Speaker. I would like to contribute to the budget policy statement motion and say this, that this country, as it moves forward, and with the kind of economy that has been battered by the COVID-19 pandemic, I think government needs to start reviewing its policy and expenditure. Mr. Speaker, what we are seeing is that we have a huge deficit within the budget that is being proposed. But even when we have such, we have key sectors within the BPS that are not adequately funded. For example, an area that I'll always talk about is the land sector. You see, the Ministry of Land and Physical Planning has the physical planning aspect, where we have put in a new PS, but the physical planning PS is given around 60 million shillings only to manage a whole department for a whole year. The idea of planning our towns and planning our cities and ensuring that we have new towns that are developing and putting the infrastructure for development will not be achieved. Why? Because there is lack of funding in key areas of land. This country, if it must develop on the basis of the Vision 2030, on the basis of the Big Four agenda by government, then requires that the land sector be properly funded so that we have enough money to ensure that people have land where they can do factories, they have land where they can plant crops for agriculture, they have land for housing, they have land for prosperity of this nation in terms of investment. But if we do not fund the land sector adequately, as it is currently in the BPS, then we have a problem taking this country forward on the basis of the development agenda of Agenda 4 that we have in this country. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, sectors of growth, and especially service sectors like tourism, which is a sector that the people of the coast rely on heavily, is being underfunded. Marketing of tourism and tourism products right now is shrinking. Why? Because we do not have enough resources in these areas. This country will develop when roads are there, but this country will develop more when we ensure that service sectors, which are the areas in this world that are growing economies in leaps and bounds, like tourism, if they're not properly funded, then you realize that there'll be no money in the pockets of the people. What this government needs to do is to make deliberate investment in this BPS to ensure that we are putting money in the pockets of the people that are at the bottom. Again, the tax brackets, there are very few people working. There are very few people earning, but they all want to consume, meaning, therefore, that we will not have enough taxes to ensure that we develop this country. We need to expand the tax base. How do we do that? By putting money in the pockets of the people so that they're able to pay taxes. When more people in this country pay taxes, then we'll reduce the debt levels that we are increasing every day. But what we have is an economy that is shrinking, and the more the economy shrinks, the people at the bottom of the pyramid are left out of paying taxes. So what we need is to empower everybody. So this budget policy statement that we have actually doesn't do that. It needs to move to ensure that every Kenyan has an opportunity to earn a living and in the process pay tax, and when he pays that tax, then we have lesser borrowing by this government. Notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, there are many sectors that have been underfunded, but there are other sectors that have huge budgets. For example, the Nairobi Metropolitan is getting a lot of money, but nobody is thinking about how to develop Mombasa the same way that we are developing Nairobi. We are going to overload Nairobi with very many things, and yet the other satellite towns, other countries, Nigeria, has moved to other cities have been developed at the same time. If you look at Tanzania today, Dar es Salaam, Dodoma are all developing almost at the same level. But what we are doing, we are putting billions of money in Nairobi, developing Nairobi, and forgetting that the second city in Mombasa is shrinking in terms of economy and in terms of investment. We need to develop another city for this country so that we can spread the wealth. The wealth in this country is being concentrated in a few areas. And when that happens, it means, therefore, that many people will move to this town, leave the other places, there'll be underdevelopment in the coast region because Mombasa is being neglected. I would say that the more money we put in Nairobi Metropolitan, the more money we should put in Mombasa so that it develops to help the economy that is there, so that Port City can develop like any other port city in this country. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
The Honorable Kaunya Oku, member for Teso North. Very well. The Honorable Leader of Majority.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the Chair of the Budget Committee and the committee for the time they have spent on this BPS, and indeed the processing thereof. I know it's taken them going into the night, and they articulated most of the issues. I don't want to spend a lot of time because the specifics have actually been very well articulated. But I want allow me, Honorable Speaker, to just correct some misconceptions that I hear on this issue of debt. Yes, it's true, the debt has gone up and will continue going up so long as we are not able to cover all the expenditures we want through our taxes. Because you can either only finance through the amount you get from taxpayers or have to borrow, so long as the need is still there. We committed ourselves to free education. We're spending 27% of our budget on education. Now, where are you going to get the money to pay the teachers if people are not paying taxes? You know, when we talk of that we're using part of debt to finance recurrent expenditure, how are you going to pay teachers? How are you going to pay doctors? We committed ourselves through the 2010 Constitution on some some basic rights that had to be provided at Article 43, right? Yet we complain that we are borrowing to finance recurrent expenditure when it is ourselves who committed ourselves to provide those services. We had to defend the country, right? Come rain or shine, the defense will have to be there. If there's no money, as well like now, our economy shrank by 5.5% in the second quarter of last year. The revenue collection went down. The commitments have not gone down. We have fixed commitments that have to be made. We have the pensions, we have parliament to run, we have judiciary to run, all those things, and debt becomes inevitable. Now, what we need to think about and what our oversight role should be looking at is if we are misusing part of that money for debt And the oversight institutions that have been set up, the asset recovery, the EACC, have been doing their job in terms of looking at those people who perhaps have not been diligent enough in doing their job. And that's what we should be emphasizing on. But debt per se is not bad. And I think we may be forced to almost think that we should never borrow, which is what we also tell ourselves, even at home. And you will see the typical Kenyan, you want to accumulate stones, buying a truck of stones every month to build a house, because you don't want to go to the bank and take a mortgage. And you have a house instantly. You start building a house when you're 20, you finish building the house when you're 40, and you don't even have time to live in it because of that fear of debt. Debt is good. And I want us not to think from that angle. Now, we are in an economy that is recovering from COVID. Kenya is not unique in this situation that we are in. You look at South Africa, look at India, look at Britain, look at every country. They are all suffering. Their debt levels compared to their GDP, I believe South Africa is now at 80%. We are not even there. If you look at India, if you look at Japan, if you look at America, America is almost 200+%. So basically, the issue we need to think of is, yes, how can we increase our income base so that we have more taxes? But when I listen to my friend, Owen Bayer, talking of that we just need to, get some bottom up, get a few guys to get some more income to them, and they'll pay taxes. It's much more complex than that. Who is going to give them services, right? You need to develop the economy from a holistic perspective. And the solution we have, if we can put more money on the big four, which is what the BPS is trying to do, the construction industry, more investments in agriculture, more investments in healthcare, so that people are healthy, people are food sufficient, people can go to school, technical trainings and all those things, then you have created a reservoir of knowledge that can be used in the future. But, this some abracadabra, bottom-up, voodoo economics will not help. It's a wish list. It's bad for people. We are giving people false hope that all you need to do is get some crude implement and you become a tax. We need to start thinking bigger. And technology is a thing, and I think the big four is done as part of that. There's something else I want to share with this house. Up to about last year, there was lots of talk about some numbers that countries should aim not to borrow more than 60% if you are if you are high, fast developed economy, 40% if you are not developed. And one of the most famous economists, a former IMF expert who I met, Olivier Blanchard, has debunked those figures and come up with a new metric, which is called the growth-corrected interest rate. Yeah, that's what countries need to think about. What is your growth-corrected interest rate about? So if you look in Kenya now, we're expecting to grow at 8.7%, and we're borrowing at 1%. We have a growth-corrected interest rate of -7%. It makes sense to borrow when you're on negative interest rates, right? But if you're growing at 1%, and you're even borrowing at 2%, then don't borrow, because your growth-corrected interest rate is positive, right? So those are some of the things that we now need to start thinking. And I want to encourage Treasury to continue the direction they're going in terms of going for low-cost, long-term interest rates regime away from the commercial ones. Because so long as we're doing that, we can actually go to the market and borrow even more so that we can finish the road that we need to finish, we can finish the investment in infrastructure, we can finish the Dogokundu investment in Mombasa. I don't know where I was last in Mombasa, but I was there the other day, and I saw the massive development taking place within Mombasa. Yeah? If you're looking at the roads from the port all the way to the Dokundu bypass, if you're looking at all the bypasses into Malindi, if you're looking at the development in the port, if you're looking at the development of the special economic zones, all those are in Mombasa. Yeah? And perhaps you need to spend some more time. Don't just go to Kilifi. Detour a bit into Mombasa, and you see the development in the second city, because It's our entry port. The SGR starts in Mombasa. and hence, you know, the volume of cargo that's coming through Mombasa is an indication of the growth that has taken place within Mombasa. If you look at the development taking place in Kisumu, it's not just connected, that's not just within Nairobi. There's lots of things happening to interconnect Kenya to the East Africa region through the development of the port of Kisumu. Look at the bypasses around Eldoret. Look at the bypasses around Nakuru. Look at, you know, all these things that are happening. There's development taking place across the entire country. But we just tend to think there's debt that is rising. We are not seeing the tangible assets, yeah? Because we are happy as politicians. We are happy to enjoy, to say, we have brought this road, but in the same meeting, we then blaming the president for increasing the debt levels, right? But debt has been used to finance the development of things and to pay salaries for teachers when companies have all shown reported negative results because of COVID, right? We know the tourism industry has collapsed. All the revenue we're collecting from hotels is gone. Somebody has to fill that gap. So I think, and I wish the Honorable John Barry was here. I know he's got a passion for this debt issue. But I would want to persuade that let us open our minds. Let us not just be blinkered. Let's open the blinkers. Let's look wide. And through the front view mirror, rather than just the rear view, something may have happened in the past. But as we go forward, we have an opportunity now. As the world is recovering, let's recover with the world. If we can access cheap debt, let's do it. So that we have this moment to complete all projects that have started, because the cost of stalled projects is enormous. Yeah? And anything that was started must be completed. So I think that's what we now need to do. And we want to encourage the Treasury, first of all, to continue reducing the budget deficit. But they can only do that so long as Kenyans are prepared to pay a little more in taxes. And none of us wants to pay taxes. So I think it's a balance, but I think I just want to make sure that let's not just be frightened on the issue of debt. And should the issue come to this House, let's look at the merits of it and pass accordingly. With those, I support.
Well spoken, Leader of Majority. The Honourable Member for Saku.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I beg to support the BPS 2021-22. And I really want to thank the Committee of Budget. The chairman has just walked out, but I'm happy that they removed the members they didn't want. They retained and added those they really wanted, and we wish them well. Honorable Speaker, really the BPS is about certain principal things that we as a country must look at when we are going to look at the printed estimate. It is about what is the assessment of the current economic situation. The man who just spoke before me was the former Minister for Finance. And I believe when he was in charge, maybe we never had things like COVID and certain serious calamities. But I think to an extent, they were able to properly manage the economy. We had more money in our pockets. There was a lot of development, and Kenya was moving so fast. To the extent that I think everybody is thinking, when are we getting back those Kibaki years? But we must move with the times. Honorable Speaker, currently, our debt stands at 7.3 trillion, which is 65% of our GDP. Considering what is the global in terms of borrowing and making the best use of that money you borrow, then it is still sustainable. But the problem that is likely to arise if this money is borrowed and then it is put in projects that are likely not to plow back into the economy. There are issues also, Honorable Speaker, about the expenditure ceiling. The departments that are under purview of Defense and Foreign Relations Committee, we found that there were rising in terms of the ceilings. But when we look at the reality, the only department that lost monies was the RDS, Regional and Development Authorities. To me, that was a serious misnomer because the RDS are the ones working with communities, like Wasonyiro North, Wasonyiro South, the KVDA, Coast Development Authority, and many others, where they have direct link with those populations in the regions that they work in. Honorable Speaker, there are also things that we want the National Treasury to be very keen about the physical responsibility that the Constitution really empowers this House under Article 95 to make sure that there's prudent and transparent management of public resources, to the extent that we will not be just talking about debt that are unsustainable, but about resources that are available for development. I think the other issue is about borrowing, whether external or internal. Currently, I think there's that discussion with IMF to grow the borrowing from 57.43 to 27.73, so that the debts must be manageable and it does not crowd out the local environment. Honorable Speaker, with those remarks, I beg to support.
The Honorable Martin Owino, member for Ndiwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this report, and I really want to thank the committee for doing a very fast and good job. Mr. Speaker, one thing that really disturbs me is the disconnect between the BPS and the annual estimates. Mr. Speaker, we can ask ourselves as Assembly, as this House, that what we do here, is it ritual or actual? Because once we have done this, it is out of our hands. The ministry, the executive, they do whatever they want to do. And that really disturbs me. However, I really agree with the committee's recommendation, number one, on tax waivers and restrictions. I think there is a lot of prudence should be put into that because it affects people directly. The other point I agree with, Mr. Speaker, is the deferment of new projects, which we also say here again and again, Mr. Speaker. But how do those who implement these projects really take a serious note on that? Because we say it, but you find that still these projects go on. In my constituency, there are so many stalled projects. And Mr. Speaker, I've been moving from office to office. Those who initiated those projects have never succeeded, including farmers' market, which is very important for the people of Ndiwa. But nobody is allocating funds to do those projects. So our question is, what happens? How can this House make sure that when we pass BPS here, what we say is implemented? Because we oversight this Department of Executive to do what we have passed here. Mr. Speaker, the other point I want to make is about the pending bills. To me, this is a robbery with violence on the people. You find small traders who do business with government, especially county governments, they borrow money. And these monies have been out there, year come, year out. They are auctioned, they run bankrupt, and nobody cares. So the issue of pending bill, I think, is a serious one. And Mr. Speaker, action should be taken. The state has no business to own businesses that they cannot manage. So I agree with the committee that these state corporations should be looked into. What the government does best, Mr. Speaker, is to create an environment where private businesses can thrive in. But globally, you can agree with me, Mr. Speaker, that government does not do good business. So they should back up and transform this to private sectors. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Big Four agenda, and I want to thank the President for setting this out. Mr. Speaker, when we talk of health, we are still underfunded in this sector by almost 7%. We are supposed to put 15% according to the declaration which was passed, but we are hardly doing even 6%. So when we are saying we are doing a budget, which should be aligned with the budget policy, these four big agendas should be funded well so that the economy can be anchored properly and get thriving. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that we should be very watchful when we pass things here. We should see how they are implemented. And I wish we could have an intervention budget that if they're going the wrong way, either through committees or through this House, we can say no. With those few remarks, I support.
The member from Ndiwa, you have that intervention button. You oversight this government agencies, and you can say no. The Honorable Jaldisa, member for Isiolo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also want to take this opportunity to thank the committee for their effort. Mr. Speaker, I have taken time to go through this BPS. And Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that if indeed what is written here will be implemented and followed through, then probably we'll see light at the end of the tunnel. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I'm saying that is because before I joined this parliament, I happened to be in a state corporation, and during that time, we were told that the state corporations will be restructured, and thus those that are not, sustaining itself will be either privatized or another innovative strategy will be put in place so that it can be sustaining itself. But Mr. Speaker, I'm shocked that to date, it's almost about, I think, 5 or so years down the line, and nothing has taken off. To make it worse, Mr. Speaker, I happen to be a new member of a sports committee, and the kind of situation that were presented to us is that most of the sagas in that ministry is about to collapse because they cannot pay the salaries, they cannot pay the rent in some points. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge the committee, and I hope the chairman is here, that the vice is seated right behind me, that this matter is really given an attention it deserves. Mr. Speaker, we appreciate that we've had a very challenging moment because of the pandemic. But I just want to be bold enough and say that even before the pandemic came into play, in as far as the economy was concerned, we were not doing well. And I just want to really wonder what has happened. Is it a matter of issues of incompetence at the Treasury, or is it a really matter of us not really being serious with our priorities? I don't know. It is a matter as a house that is vested with responsibility to make sure there is checks and balance. We take that role very serious. Mr. Speaker, I'm saying this because our debt ceiling in this country is really worrying. And I was listening to one economist, and it really made a lot of sense. And he was saying, I think it is the high time, as a country, we think of doing away with the debt ceiling. We don't put a ceiling on our debt. Instead, we put a ceiling on our deficit. Because as long as we will continue having a deficit, then we will still continue having a debt going on and on and on. Therefore, it's something that really, as a house, we really need to think about it. How do we contain our budget deficit, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, sir, the issue that is so dear to those of us from the arid and semi-arid, the issue of equalization fund, I saw it was captured here, and they said, don't know, 6 point something billion, it will be released. Mr. Speaker, this fund has never been released, and the excuse has always been lack of legislative policy. And now that the bill has been passed, we expect this fund to be released. We, the pastoralists of this country, the livestock farmers, contribute 40% to the GDP of this country. And Mr. Speaker, it is not fair when other sectors are given weights, and a sector like livestock, which does not cost the government so much, is not given attention. Mr. Speaker, with that, I also want to say the pending bill. The President has continuously given directive to make sure that pending bills are paid. And I don't.
The Honorable Jaldisa, you ran out of time. I shall have the Honorable Wangwe, member for Navaholo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise on the onset to support this report by the Committee on Budget, where I'm also a member, and I want to thank my colleagues for the good work done. They took their time, and they really had to go extra mile. Honorable Speaker, I just have one or two things to observe in this report that I'll want to really align myself with. The first one, Honorable Speaker, being the appreciation of the two levels of government, that the negotiated formula, negotiated amount that was really a thorn in the flesh of this country has really been observed in this budget, BPS, Honorable Speaker. And the county governments are going to get their money as they negotiated. 370 billion is factored into the BPS, and Honorable Speaker, that is going to give them what they really negotiated. The only thing that we would want the Honorable Speaker to say is that this figure is too high, and how I wish there was room for renegotiation so that they align it downwards in terms of not taking the strain, the toll strain that it has taken in terms of combining resources that would be otherwise for roads, resources that would have otherwise gone for level 5 hospitals. Now it is all put into that. But what is good is that this is a negotiated position, and it has taken a position in that direction, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, what makes me also be aligned to this BPS and accept it, Honorable Speaker, is the issue that I come from the agricultural zone, and agriculture has been recognized in this BPS, and most of the resources that shall go into crop production have really been aligned properly into this BPS. We find the e-voucher system is a new line of thought by the government and is well taken care of into this BPS, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it's also important to note that the issue of the budget deficit vis-a-vis the overall debt portfolio of the country, the budget, Honorable Speaker, is something to observe, is something to really call on our colleagues that we must now raise above politics, but now think of the economy of this country, Honorable Speaker. When we are now going to borrow 930 billion to finance our 2021-2022 financial year, is not a good thing to smile, Honorable Speaker. It's all going to hit into the overall debt portfolio of this country, Honorable Speaker. That is something that we must say, we borrow for the right cause. And that's why, Honorable Speaker, in the Budget Committee, when you look at this report, we are restrictive. We don't want to borrow, and then you borrow to finance new projects which will not end to give back the money to the economy. We want to borrow, Honorable Speaker, so that we are able to pay the pending bills which are owed to the small people who have supplied various ministries, Honorable Speaker. Once you pay that small person on the ground, he is going to spur the economy in terms of spending, in terms of raise in cost of living, and Honorable Speaker, definitely that money will come back. We are not going to borrow, Honorable Speaker, to give mega projects whose lifeline is too long. We want to borrow, Honorable Speaker, so that we are able to quickly get the value for money, whereby, Honorable Speaker, in the next 1 year or two, we are able to see that the functions as to why you are borrowing is realized on the ground, Honorable Speaker. So for that reason, Honorable Speaker, the allowance of 930 billion to be borrowed to fund this year's budget, in my view and the view of the committee, Honorable Speaker, I'm happy. It will be a good thing. However, with a caution to the Minister in charge of Treasury that the 7.5% level of borrowing to the GDP is too high. We would want, Honorable Speaker, that we caution the Treasury to really work hard and lower this percentage. However, this percentage is manageable, is within the overall global percentages where other countries are borrowing, and is something which we can still work with, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I just want also to look at the issue in terms of policy, whereby, Honorable Speaker, we are looking at the issues to do with the state-owned enterprises, Honorable Speaker. And on this one, Honorable Speaker, it's important that the government really takes our recommendation serious, and that they really release some of these very expensive state-owned enterprises to the public. Let the state not do business, Honorable Speaker. It's now outdated that the government can hang on to state enterprises so that it continues to control, yet it can release this industry into the hands of private sectors so that private players can pay the government in terms of taxes. We look at enterprises like, Honorable Speaker, the sugar mills. These are dead factories. We just wrote off the debts, 85 billion worth of debt in this House, Honorable Speaker. Why did we write off the debt, and yet the factories are still not running? They are the main employers of about 2,000 people one factory can employ at a time. We want the state-owned enterprises to be released, and I call on the Privatization Commission that let them wake up and do their job. Let them do the justice to the Kenyan people by making sure that these enterprises get private. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I support the report.
The Honorable Millie Odhiambo, Mabona, member for Suba North. The Honorable Millie, the mic is behind you. That is the one. I don't know why these particular ones are around you always.
They always misbehave, Mr.
Yes.
Speaker.
Yeah, use that one.
Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank the Budget Committee. I'm a member, and I know we burnt literally the midnight oil in order for us to come up with this report. We finished that day at 1 a.m. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that even in supporting, one of the comments I made then and I will make here is that this budget policy statement is fairly business as usual, and it does not take into account the circumstances under which we are operating as a country.
Mr. Speaker, we have just undergone COVID-19, which is subsisting. There are weather-related shocks, and also 2022 is an election year. But if you see the way the BPS is couched, it mentions those issues, but does not actually have a very clear strategy that deals with that. Mr. Speaker, it is very optimistic and projects a 7% economic growth in the year. And Mr. Speaker, that is actually fairly possible because of the battered economy, especially as a result of the circumstances that we are talking about. But it will take a while before the growth is realized with the ordinary Kenyans, and especially for the poorer and vulnerable like the women. So I'd hoped it would focus on a post-COVID recovery strategy, a very clear one that focuses on the growth sectors, but also that cushions the Kenyans that are most likely to be affected, who are mainly women that are in the industries that are affected and young people. Mr. Speaker, I do appreciate and acknowledge that because of the legacy project, there's a very delicate balancing act that we have to ensure that the legacy projects are realized, and it will be foolhardy for us to say that they stop because we know this is the last year of the president. If he doesn't, we are hearing different voices. The same people who are telling the president to stop them here are the ones who are going out in the public and attacking him for not realizing those projects, including my very good friend, the former chair of Budget, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah. And because of that, there must be a very delicate balancing act to ensure that the projects that the president has set out to do, he has actually done. Mr. Speaker, I know that there are certain areas where the people are actually attacking the president, but I've spent my time going around this country very quietly. And the president is doing a lot of infrastructural works. And the people in those areas will realize when he is gone. Right now, they may not realize, but he's doing quite a bit of infrastructural work. It's the same way we are forgetting we attacked Mwai Kibaki, the former president, but now we keep referring Mwai Kibaki days. It was good. I think it's kind of human nature. So, Chair, I don't know what's happening with my system, and I hope you'll take account when it finally stops. And so, Chair, I would just want to say, I think because of also that disturbance, that despite that, Chair, I would hope that some of the issues that are of concern for me, of course, as members have said, is the issue of the linkage between the BPS and the budget. There's always a discordance there. We have raised it with the Treasury, and we are hoping it will be rectified. Chair, secondly, the issue of pending bills. And I know we have spoken very strongly as a budget committee, but there are many people that are reeling from the effects of COVID-19. But not only that, they already had pending bills from the government. Many people are committing suicide. Many people are, we are seeing very outrageous behavior. Even now, if you look at the election process that is ongoing, the level of violence that is coming up, Mr. Speaker, even though usually violence is there, but it's kind of a bit unprecedented. Mr. Speaker, also the issue of NGCDF, members have spoken to it, and we must deal with it because there are many constituencies. If that doesn't happen, they will be disadvantaged, and it will talk to the issue of iniquities that is unconstitutional. And Mr. Speaker, also the issue of a need for a very clear debt management strategy. Mr. Speaker, with your kindness, could I just have 1 more minute because of the interruptions?
Yes, the Honorable Millie, before you could start speaking, actually 1 minute had lapsed, so you will have an extra 2 minutes.
Thank you. And Mr. Speaker, thank you for indulging in my extra 2 minutes. I just wanted to say that on a daily basis, we usually have Bible study in my house, and I've learned a very powerful lesson from my grandchild, Dana, that as adults, we like giving very complex solutions. Like yesterday, we were talking about reading the first chapter of the book of Joshua when the Israelites were moving into Canaan. And so everybody says what lessons they have. And as we are saying, oh, God's faithfulness and all that. But Dana said, why is God taking other people's land? Did they pay for it? That's the mind of an 8-year-old child. Have they paid? Why are they? And he's shocked. And this Benjamin tribe that is remaining behind, who are they living with their children? Mr. Speaker, our budgeting and our legislation must have the mind of a child. Let us not have very complex economic theories. How does it affect the ordinary Kenyan? How does it affect the woman? How does it affect the child? How does it affect the most vulnerable in the society, those who have been affected by COVID-19, those who have lost their jobs, so that we are not having people committing suicide in this country when we are moving with business as usual? I support.
Well spoken, the Honorable Millie. I've always wondered whose people they are, the Philistines that were being chased away from. But that is a debate for another day. The Honorable Nyamai Kaki, member for Kitui South.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Honorable Speaker, I would like to start by thanking the Departmental Committee on Budget and Appropriations for engaging us as chairs in a very strict way, but also in a friendly manner. Honorable Speaker, I say this because I was in the 11th Parliament and in the 12th Parliament, and I can see the difference in terms of the way we are engaged. Honorable Speaker, in the interest of time, I would like to go direct to matters regarding Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning and National Land Commission. Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by saying that this is a very important ministry, also a National Land Commission, extremely important. But when we look at the level of funding, Honorable Speaker, there is always quite a deficit, and it is something that I would like to ask that it be addressed in the sector working groups. Honorable Speaker, the Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning has a deficit with regard to recurrent of more than $1 billion shillings, and it affects critical programs. And also when we go to settlement, a settled community will be able to generate money. And we have realized that the ministry has been budgeting in 2020-2021, they had budgeted for 180 with a ceiling of 240. But we realize that we always give or argue for the ministry to get money.
The time is runs too fast, but we are saying very good things. It is true that this country, our projects are exaggerated simply because the land value system in this country is tampered with in a way that it makes it impossible to do projects. The Honorable Koinange, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support the report on the BPS 2021. Out of policy priorities, they will accord the national security sector. Honorable Speaker, the role of security in economic development cannot be gainsaid, as an environment free of conflict is a boost into investor confidence and will ease the process of implementing the Big Four agenda plan. National security is a prerequisite for any development to take place. Honorable Speaker, the role of the various security agents, therefore, helps to bring out confidence on the minds of the people, because if the people are assured of security, the economy and market will equally have their thrust and support, which in turn will bring about progress and development. Honorable Speaker, as part of post-COVID-19 ERS measures, I'm happy that the government will enhance budgetary allocation to facilitate delivery of services by security agencies. Police and national government administration officers play a very critical role in maintaining law and order and ensuring adherence to curfew and other rules and regulations put in place to contain coronavirus pandemic, including contact tracing. Honorable Speaker, part of the resources proposed in this BPS will be used to sensitize the police and national government administration officers in appropriate COVID-19 personal safety measures to protect themselves and those they serve being infected by the virus. It will also provide police officers with adequate protective gear and equipment, including face masks, sanitizers, and hand washing facilities. Honorable Speaker, to further enhance security operation during and after the pandemic, the BPS priorities operationalization of the newly gazetted police stations, implementation of border security management system to enhance cross-border movements of both passengers and goods, acquire additional assorted security equipment to enhance the mobility for both police and national government administration officers, NGA. The government is working to acquire 1,200 assorted vehicles and 5,000 motorcycles for chiefs and assistant chiefs. Cascade e-passport and visa automation to 4 additional stations locally and abroad. Complete digitization and automation of immigration and complete digitization and automation of comprehensive registration system. Honorable Speaker, to maintain economic stability and attract investment, national security is very critical. A safe and secure environment remains a prerequisite for achieving the Big Four agenda. I want to report to this House that the government has undertaken reforms that target to improve the capacity of the security forces to protect Kenyans against internal and external aggression. In particular, the government has increased funding to all security agencies to improve their operations. Honorable Speaker, the